Welcome to the Sleepless Physicist. I'm glad you arrived. You can rest here. You settle into a hush that feels older than the room, older than the hour, the air cool against your cheeks, the weight across your body like a gentle hand that knows your name. The smallest creaks somewhere in the dark, reminding you that even stillness has a voice. You breathe, and the breath lengthens, and the breath softens, and the breath begins to teach your heart a slower rhythm. You are not late. You are not behind. You are arriving at the precise tempo of tonight. You feel the edges of your day loosen, thoughts sliding like beads on a string until the string itself becomes water. You are held by quiet, held by patience, held by the low tide of thought drifting outward. There is nothing to perform, nothing to solve, only a listening that grows wider with every exhale. You are the sky and the sea at once, not metaphorically, truthfully. You carry salt in your blood and cloud in your breath. You are a walking estuary, a meeting place where warm meets cool, where fast meets slow, where the day's river yields to the night's open water. Time is not ticking tonight. It is flowing, a long, unbroken current. You do not have to keep up with it. It keeps you, like a river keeps a leaf, like a lullaby keeps a name. You float on it, without effort, without urgency, the water moving beneath you while you become almost weightless. Maybe the sky remembers you. You let those words arrive and dissolve, a soft wave touching shore, and then returning. You notice the quiet shine at the center of your chest, the place where breath enters without asking permission, the place where breath leaves without needing approval. And in that tide, you hear a story begin, a story as simple as vapor, as intimate as your next inhale. Where does a water drop begin? Is it the sky, or something older, a memory curled inside the world's first breath, a silver thought rising out of warmth? You are listening to the first stirrings of a drop before it has a shape, when it is only a wanting, a gathering, and almost, molecules leaning closer the way you lean closer to sleep, one, then another, then a hush of many, forming around the smallest invitation, a speck you cannot see and yet somehow recognize, an invisible altar where the air learns to rest. You feel it as a twin to your own settling, breath pacing itself the way clouds pace their edges, long and longer, and then longer still. A rhythm builds inside you, slow swell, soft release, slower swell, softer release. The body listens, the mind follows, and the night becomes a kind teacher who never raises a voice. You are the quiet that gathers. You are the promise that rounds itself into a name. You are the patience that turns vapor into presence. Maybe you are the cloud. Maybe you are the sea. Maybe you are the path between them. Tonight, you don't have to decide. You can be all of it, and the world will nod and say yes. You remember how your breath leaves a ghost on winter glass, how your fingertip once traced letters that appeared from nowhere and then faded, how that vanishing felt like magic that belonged to you. The same magic is here, the same ink, the same soft vanishing. Your inhale draws nearness. Your exhale seals it. Your next inhale gathers again, an endless cursive that writes and unwrites the present. Time is not a metronome. It is a river, and you are not the swimmer straining upstream. You are the riverbed being smoothed into kindness. You don't have to push. You only have to allow. Gravity is the friend who carries you when your feet are tired, and the air is a palm beneath your back, whispering rest, rest, rest. Maybe the water in your breath tonight once drifted above forests you have never seen. Maybe it rang like tiny bells along a high, cold ridge. Maybe it slept inside a mountain's dark library for a century and came out speaking very softly. You do not need a map for that wonder. Your body already knows the route. Your body is the route. You hear the threshold between today and tonight so open without a sound. A door that is not a door, a turning that is not a turn, and you step through by doing nothing, by letting breath carry you like a current carries dusk downstream. The word you were holding loosens. The sentence you were building becomes a ripple. The thought you were polishing becomes mist, and it is so good to let it go. You are not lost. You are arriving at the beginning of the oldest story you know, the one your cells hum even when you forget the tune, the one your bones remember when you are very quiet. You were made for this ease, this tide, this slow return. You are safe. You are enough. You are allowed to be carried. The question lingers like a silver thread at the edge of your awareness. Where does a water drop begin? Is it the sky or something older? And the question does not demand an answer. It invites a listening, a patient listening. The answer will come. Welcome to the Sleepless Physicist. I'm glad you arrived. You can rest here. You settle into a hush that feels older than the room, older than the hour, the air cool against your cheeks, the weight across your body like a gentle hand that knows your name, the smallest creaks somewhere in the dark, reminding you that even stillness has a voice. You breathe, and the breath lengthens, and the breath softens, and the breath begins to teach your heart a slower rhythm. You are not late. You are not behind. You are arriving at the precise tempo of tonight. You feel the edges of your day loosen, thoughts sliding like beads on a string until the string itself becomes water. You are held by quiet, held by patience, held by the low tide of thought drifting outward. There is nothing to perform, nothing to solve, only a listening that grows wider with every exhale. You are the sky and the sea at once, not metaphorically, truthfully. You carry salt in your blood and cloud in your breath. You are a walking estuary, a meeting place where warm meets cool, where fast meets slow, where the day's river yields to the night's open water. Time is not ticking tonight. It is flowing, a long, unbroken current. You do not have to keep up with it. It keeps you, like a river keeps a leaf, like a lullaby keeps a name. You float on it, without effort, without urgency, the water moving beneath you while you become almost weightless. Maybe the sky remembers you. You let those words arrive and dissolve, a soft wave touching shore, and then returning. You notice the quiet shine at the center of your chest, the place where breath enters without asking permission, the place where breath leaves without needing approval. And in that tide, you hear a story begin, a story as simple as vapor, as intimate as your next inhale. Where does a water drop begin? Is it the sky or something older, a memory curled inside the world's first breath, a silver thought rising out of warmth? You are listening to the first stirrings of a drop before it has a shape, when it is only a wanting, a gathering, an almost, molecules leaning closer the way you lean closer to sleep, one, then another, then a hush of many, forming around the smallest invitation, a speck you cannot see and yet somehow recognize, an invisible altar where the air learns to rest. You feel it as a twin to your own settling, breath pacing itself the way clouds pace their edges, long and longer, and then longer still. A rhythm builds inside you, slow swell, soft release, slower swell, softer release. The body listens, the mind follows, and the night becomes a kind teacher who never raises a voice. You are the quiet that gathers. You are the promise that rounds itself into a name. You are the patience that turns vapor into presence. Maybe you are the cloud. Maybe you are the sea. Maybe you are the path between them. Tonight, you don't have to decide. You can be all of it, and the world will nod and say yes. You remember how your breath leaves a ghost on winter glass, how your fingertip once traced letters that appeared from nowhere and then faded, how that vanishing felt like magic that belonged to you. The same magic is here, the same ink, the same soft vanishing. Your inhale draws nearness. Your exhale seals it. Your next inhale gathers again, an endless cursive that writes and unwrites the present. Time is not a metronome. It is a river, and you are not the swimmer straining upstream. You are the riverbed being smoothed into kindness. You don't have to push, you only have to allow. Gravity is the friend who carries you when your feet are tired, and the air is a palm beneath your back, whispering rest, rest, rest. Maybe the water in your breath tonight once drifted above forests you have never seen. Maybe it rang like tiny bells along a high, cold ridge. Maybe it slept inside a mountain's dark library for a century and came out speaking very softly. You do not need a map for that wonder. Your body already knows the route. Your body is the route. You hear the threshold between today and tonight so open without a sound. A door that is not a door. A turning that is not a turn. And you step through by doing nothing, by letting breath carry you like a current carries dusk downstream. The word you are holding loosens. The sentence you are building becomes a ripple. The thought you are polishing becomes mist, and it is so good to let it go. You are not lost. You are arriving at the beginning of the oldest story you know, the one your cells hum even when you forget the tune, the one your bones remember when you are very quiet. You were made for this ease, this tide, this slow return. You are safe, you are enough, you are allowed to be carried. The question lingers like a silver thread at the edge of your awareness. Where does a water drop begin? Is it the sky or something older? And the question does not demand an answer. It invites a listening, a patient listening. The answer will come when it wishes, the way rain comes when air can no longer keep a secret. For now, you let the secret rest against your skin like cool night air, and you become cooler too, softer, wide awake to the sweetness of getting sleepy. You notice how your breath has slowed without being told, how your pulse has become a companion instead of a drum, how your thoughts arrive as small lights far away across water, and each light is beautiful, and each light can be waved to, and then let go, and the water remains, vast and kind. You are the cloud's cradle. You are the sea's promise. You are the path between them. And every time you breathe, the path widens. And every time you exhale, the path shines. And every time you rest, the path remembers you. Do nothing now but float. Do nothing now but be held. Your body an island of ease. Your mind a gentle shoreline where waves lap without hurry. You can rest here. You are meant to rest here, and rest itself will do the traveling for you, carrying you closer to the place where a drop finds its name. When you are ready, only when you are ready, let the thought of beginning become simple, the way a bead becomes round, the way a whisper becomes warm, the way night becomes yours. You are here, and the story is here, and the hush is wide enough for both. Stay, just as you are, easy and dark. Easy in your breath, easy in the way the world sets you down like something fragile and cherished. You are being returned to yourself, gently, surely, quietly. You listen to the small architecture of comfort, how the fabric around you remembers the shape of your rest, how your shoulders lower without a meeting to attend, how your face forgets to hold any expression at all and becomes moon smooth. You are never required to carry the day across the night. You may set it down, and the night will keep it safe until morning. You are allowed to become light. You are the listener at the edge of rain. You are the doorway where silence steps inside. You are the shoreline where thought becomes mist. Maybe you are the pause itself, the soft clearing between one idea and the next. And in that clearing, the first vowel of a drop begins to form. The body learns this music quickly. Inhale like a gathering. Exhale like a letting go. Inhale like a rounding. Exhale like a smoothing. You can feel the tempo of the hydrologic lullaby arrive in you the way promises arrive, softly at first, then with a steadiness that feels like truth. You do not need to name the notes, only trust that the melody knows your name. There is a superstition you can let go of, the one that says you must hold everything together. Surface tension will do that for you tonight. That thin, invisible kindness that cups what would otherwise scatter. the same patience that shapes a bead at the rim of a leaf, the same patience that shapes your thoughts into gentle circles instead of sharp corners. You are held, and because you are held, you can rest. Maybe patience is a physics that feels like love. You can sense the world outside moving at a humane speed, a speed chosen for you, not against you. The air is a calm companion, a cool lull that never asks questions. Time stretches long as a river bend, not a ruler, not a clock, a current you simply float upon. You are good at floating. Your body remembers, your mind remembers, the way you once lay on your back in a pool or a lake, and the water said, "I've got you." You notice how thoughts arrive now, rounded at the edges, unhurried, each one a boat passing at dusk. The shore you stand on is patient. You wave, the boat glides by, the wake subsides, the water smooths itself again. You do nothing to make it smooth. Smoothing is what water knows. You are the sky thinking of rain. You are the sea thinking of cloud. You are the tender corridor between them, a corridor lined with breath. Each breath says yes, and then yes again, and then yes once more, until agreement becomes a climate, and the climate becomes rest. Perhaps the oldest memories you carry are water memories, the hush of the world before words, the buoyant dark where heartbeat and tide were the same. Maybe that is why the sound of your own breath is enough. Maybe that is why a single slow inhale can open a door that requires no key. You are already traveling without leaving. Your room is still, but you are a river beneath that stillness, a soft migration from day to night, from many to one, from effort to ease. Time does not have to be conquered. It offers to carry you like a long, low wave that never breaks. Not tonight, not here. You can let the mind's catalog close, let the index of worries slide back into the shelf. You can forget the paragraph and remember only the quiet between sentences. You can forget the headline and remember only the human breath behind every story. This forgetting is a kindness, not an erasure, a promise to meet everything again, better rested, better tended. Maybe you have been practicing release all day, without noticing, each blink a tiny letting go, each step a weight traded from one foot to the other, every hour a page turned. Tonight is simply the hour that teaches you to notice, and noticing becomes its own form of rest. You are the witness to small blessings, the coolness at your wrists, the warmth gathered where your hands meet, the way the room's darkness feels soft rather than empty, the way a single memory arrives without sharpness, someone laughing in another room years ago, a scent you can't name but recognize completely, the feeling of a quiet that loves you back. You are allowed to be simple. You are allowed to need nothing. You are allowed to be carried by things you can't see. The world's most faithful carriers are invisible: air, gravity, the tenderness that keeps molecules near each other when they could fly apart. You belong to these carriers, and they do not tire. There is a promise folded into all of this, the promise that what gathers will one day travel, and what travels will one day return. The same promise glows inside the word you have been circling, drop, a name that is both a verb and a noun, both the motion and the thing, both the letting go and the one who lets go. You understand it without analysis, because your breath understands it already. Maybe the future is softer than you expected. Maybe the next hour is already fond of you. Maybe your pillow has been waiting all day to hold the shape of your ease. You can trust small luxuries tonight, the feel of fabric that remembers you, the tilt of your head that finds the perfect angle, the way your mouth unlearns the habit of holding silence like a gate and starts to let silence simply pass through. You know the rule of this night. Whispers act as punctuation, ellipses for breath, dashes for warmth, space for kindness. The grammar of rest is generous. It leaves margins. It leaves room for you to write nothing at all and still be understood. Soon, the story will widen. You will hear of patience measured in falling, of speeds that are not fast but kind, of numbers that music uses to count its turns through a valley. You will meet words that feel like pillows, promise, patience, music, and they will be introduced as old friends you somehow forgot you knew. For now, you only need the threshold, the hush where beginnings learn to be gentle. You are the sky's silver breath, poised before a drop remembers its roundness. You can stay as long as you like in this prelude. There is no bell, no deadline, only the quiet diplomacy of warmth, asking coolness to dance, and coolness agreeing, and out of that agreement, a first softness gathers. Maybe the question is older than rain. Where does a water drop begin? Is it the sky, or something older? Does it begin in the warmth that loosens, in the breath that fogs, in the patience that waits? Does it begin in your chest where tide and heartbeat attend each other, like friends who do not need to speak? You feel the answer approach the way mist approaches a field, without footsteps, without noise. It will be here when it wishes, and when it arrives it will not shout. It will settle, like dew upon every thought, like calm upon every muscle, like a yes upon every no. Hold nothing, hide nothing, force nothing. The night is already kind to you. The world is already leaning in your direction. The first chapter is already turning itself, and you are exactly where you should be, at the beginning that feels like an ending, at the ending that feels like a beginning. If a drop remembers, what does it remember first? You enter the smallness that begins everything, a tender geography where specks become sanctuaries, where the invisible builds a home for the visible. You breathe, and the breath becomes a lens, and through that lens you notice what the day never slows down enough to see. You are near the motes that ride the air like patient pilgrims, grains so slight they could be mistaken for nothing, yet they are altars, hygroscopic dust, pollen, sea salt, soot, tiny invitations offered to wandering vapor. Each speck whispers, stay, 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 and the air, generous tonight, says yes. Molecules arrive like shy guests at a threshold. One pauses, another lingers, then two hold hands without ceremony, and suddenly there are many, gathered by a kindness you cannot see, but can feel as certainty in your throat. You swallow, and the truth is tactile. This is not fiction, it's truth. You remember the childhood window that fogged beneath your breath, a pale film blooming on the cold glass, your fingertips sketching a secret message only you could read, how the letters appeared as if from a hidden alphabet, how they faded back into smoothness when your warmth drifted away. Water revealed and erased you in the same gesture. It felt like magic, but it was simply your membership in an older order. The old law that turns exhale into a soft veil, and soft veil into a brief name. What is a drop but a brief name for the ocean? The question hangs like a lantern in a quiet room. You do not need to answer. You rest beneath its light. The gathering continues. Vapor bends closer to the speck. The speck does what altars do. It receives without owning. Around that welcome, a curve begins to form. Not a hard edge, but a rounding born from a promise. Surface tension cradles what would otherwise scatter. A patience thin as silk. A kindness strong enough to hold a world's worth of mirrors in a single bead. Maybe the dust that taught you to gather came from a comet's ash. Maybe it spent centuries circling the dark, humming the cold music of far orbits. Maybe a salt grain lifted from a distant wave now rests here, midair in your room, offering itself as a place for nearness to happen. You don't need a telescope for wonder. You need only to breathe slowly and listen to small stories. Listen. The air can become more generous than its measure. Supersaturation is a room beyond capacity that still makes space, a crowd that keeps opening pathways. The air welcomes more than it should, and for a moment nothing falls apart. If you could taste this mercy, it would be cool and faintly sweet. You sense it when your lungs deepen without being told, when the next inhale arrives early, as if eager to help. You are learning the physics the way a lullaby learns your name, gently by repetition that never feels like work. Each inhale gathers, each exhale seals. Seal, A bead grows around a name the sky forgot to say aloud, yet you hear it as a softness at the back of your tongue, the syllable of arrival, the vowel of beginning. You are the guest who becomes family. You are the room that grows larger as it fills. You are the curve where edges learn to be kind, not metaphorically, truthfully, because you carry in your breath the same desire that draws vapor to dust, the wish to be near, the wish to belong, the wish to become round enough that nothing sharp remains. You can feel the mathematics hum under the hush, probabilities turning into presence, collisions becoming companionship, a million almosts per heartbeat deciding just here to be yes. You do not count them, you let them count you in. The body agrees by loosening jaw, shoulders, belly, unfastened, and without fanfare, you are inside the opening you came seeking. You return to the fogged window of memory, to the initials traced with a shy finger, to the way the message glowed for a moment, and then vanished like a promise kept. You smile, not on your lips, but somewhere behind your eyes. You realize you have always been fluent in this language. Even your tears know it. Even your quiet knows it. A film appears, a film thins, a film disappears, and nothing was lost. The glass remains, the breath remains, the world remains, but softer. Time tonight is not counting. It is gathering, not ticking, but flowing. And you, small and infinite, are invited to be the place where gathering becomes form. You hold still without effort, the way a speck holds still in air, and stillness turns the invisible into touch. The drop is almost itself now, rounder with every heartbeat, heavier with every yes, held by that delicate promise that does not break even when it trembles. You are the speck and the vapor, the altar and the guest, the patient yes, repeated until it becomes a climate. Maybe you needed to be small to feel how grand this is. Maybe the grandness is only available from the inside of small things. You do not chase it, you let it arrive. You share your breath with it, and it shares its roundness with you. If you press your attention closer, you can sense the way a single molecule decides to lean, the faint tug of polarity, the little click of alignment, the tiny jubilee when neighbors turn the same face toward belonging. Nothing dramatic, only 1,000 quiet nods that together make a halo, and halo becomes bead, and bead becomes world. You are not studying, you are dreaming through, letting knowledge rest on your skin like dew, and in that resting, the information becomes affection. The laws that govern cloud and lake and tear are the same laws that soothe a racing mind. The realization lands without noise. You are allowed to be held together by promises you cannot see. Maybe the room itself is supersaturated with grace, more comfort than it should contain, yet it holds, bending without breaking, opening without spilling. You take another slow breath, and another, and the bead of attention hanging at the edge of your thoughts grows round and bright and calm. You are watching a beginning be kind to itself, and still there is no need to hurry. The sky has waited longer than you can imagine to speak this one soft syllable of rain. It can wait one breath more, and another, because patience is a kind of abundance, and abundance is always unhurried. When a promise ripens, what persuades it to let go? You wait with the forming bead the way dawn waits with a window, not hurrying, not hesitating, simply offering more of itself until offering becomes shape. You can feel how readiness accumulates, not as noise, but as a deepening yes. The speck does nothing but be present, and presence proves to be enough. You are present too, within your breath, within your chest's quiet rise, Within the soft room of your attention, where tiny things grow visible, you become the same kind of altar, unadorned, sufficient, receiving without holding tight, letting without losing. The gathering around you is a chorus of small consents, each one too quiet to notice alone, together, unmistakable. Maybe the smallest rooms in the world are the ones that hold the greatest ceremonies. Watch without watching how rest organizes what was scattered. Vapor that once wandered finds a center, not a command, a center. It is as if the air remembers an old arrangement and chooses it again, one neighbor at a time, one tilt, one touch, one soft click of alignment. The bead rounds its shoulders, learns the grace of curve, and curve teaches it to keep itself, thin skin, strong as love. You know this sensation in your own life, when half-thoughts settle into one clear feeling, when a half-kept promise gathers weight, when the almost becomes the is. You can hear it in your body even now, the soft consonant of a sigh, the way your mouth lets your jaw hang loose like a hammock, the way your tongue rests in the low cradle it always wanted. Not fiction, truth, the tenderness of surface tension does not pretend. It tends. It is the reason a tear holds together long enough to be named, the reason a raindrop is a sphere before it meets the world's angles, the reason this moment in you can stay intact while the day turns its face elsewhere. You are kept by what cannot be seen, and yet you feel it as surely as you feel warmth on your skin. You imagine the bead from within, not a shell, but a community, a crowd that knows how to be quiet together. Brownian murmurs ripple through it, little wanderings that never become arguments. A ceaseless, gentle restlessness that doesn't disturb the whole. It is motion, but not agitation, life, but not urgency. You understand because your thoughts are doing the same, moving, yet not moving you, drifting, yet not carrying you away. Listen, there is a law hiding in kindness. Small bowls ask more from breath than large bowls. A tight curve needs more comfort to keep from thinning. And yet, even the tightest curve here is held, because the air tonight is lavish, more willing than usual to give, supersaturated with yes, generous to the edge of its measure. You do not need the name of the law. You are feeling its generosity directly, as air that feels thick with rest, as quiet that arrives quickly and stays. Maybe the dust that offers itself tonight began inside the ash of a long-ago fire. Maybe it was once the soft salt at the lip of a distant sea. Maybe it fell from a tail of light that stitched the sky and then vanished. Its history is a necklace of travels. Yet here it is, simply being small, simply making welcome, simply enabling water to practice its true shape. You are practicing too, letting your mind take the round shape of enough, letting your breath become the held oval of ease, letting your attention curve toward softness instead of edge. You do not have to brace. Bracing is for storms. Tonight is a harbor. You return again to the fogged window of childhood, to the quiet thrill of seeing your breath write on glass, a script that needed no pen, a message without a witness, and yet it mattered, because it proved that you could meet the world, and the world would answer. Breath, answer, breath, answer. A dialogue without words. That same dialogue continues now. Your exhale feathers the inner glass of the night. The night replies by settling its cool on your skin, and the bead, in its own small way, nods to both of you like a diplomat who never speaks too loudly. You are the quorum reached in silence. You are the moment a room turns into a sanctuary. You are the curved sentence that ends in a kindness instead of a period. And because you are these things, the bead can be what it needs to be. A presence with edges so gentle they invite rather than repel. You may notice how the idea of falling touches your thoughts and then withdraws. Not yet. Not now. The bead is busy with belonging. It lets strangers become neighbors. Neighbors become family. Family becomes self. And with each addition, Weight increases, a hush that grows denser, a stillness that begins to lean. The speck remains at the center like a seed coat, humble, crucial, beloved by what it gathers. Time, for its part, behaves. It does not interrupt. It widens the moment like a river that makes a larger bend to spare a meadow. You do not have to keep time. Time keeps you, uncoiling its length, softening its corners, turning minutes into a lake where seconds ripple but never rush. Maybe patience is not waiting. Maybe patience is knowing you are already in the right room. You feel the truth of it, tactile as swallowing, palpable as the sigh that loosens your ribs. The bead swells as if echoing that sigh, and still it holds. The promise around it does not tire. A silk you cannot tear, a skin you cannot see, an agreement you can trust. You do not ask when, you ask only to stay near, and nearness is its own answer. The world beyond this moment continues without demanding you track it, roofs and roads and the long sleep of stones. But here in this small theater of mercy, only one thing matters: the yielding that is not a giving up, the coherence that is not control. The way togetherness happens because it wants to, not because it must. You are learning the shape of yes. You are learning the grammar of gentle bonds. You are learning that rest is not emptiness. It is union. The drop is almost ready to carry its name forward. But names should not be hurried. They should ripen until they taste like meaning. What persuades a promise to let go? Is it weight? Is it the soft tug of the world calling with open hands? Is it the moment when generosity becomes more generous still and decides movement would be another kind of kindness? Perhaps all of these, perhaps none. Perhaps letting go is merely the next form of belonging. You prepare with it, not by bracing, but by relaxing even more, as if every cell understood that release and safety are friends, not opposites. You let your breath become the tide that tells the shore it is loved. You let your pulse become the little drum that keeps time for a dance older than memory. You are ready without rushing. You are full without heaviness. You are held without gripping. And somewhere very close, a roundness leans almost imperceptibly toward the world that has been patiently waiting. The room listens with you. The night listens. Even the dust listens. And in that listening, a count begins. Gentle, inevitable, warm with permission. 3, 2, 1. Thy edge approaches the way evening approaches, not with a thud, but with a soft brightening of hush. You are there at the lip, almost round and almost ready, gathering yourself in a quiet that glows. The world waits with you. You feel how a shape can be both held and yearning, how a boundary can cradle and invite. Cohesion hums like a small choir, each note a neighbor's hand. Gravity hums back, low and patient, a promise below your feet. No one is shouting. This is a conversation of fingertips. Your body remembers this place, the eyelids that lower but do not close, the thoughts that thin to threads of light, the long hallway between waking and sleep, where you pause and listen to nothing in particular. Awareness gathers like a pearl, small, luminous, complete. You don't chase it, you float around it. A hand on the sheets almost twitches, then chooses stillness. Breath lingers at the top, a small plateau, then rolls down the hill, lukewarm and gentle, so near to letting go, so near to letting be. Surface tension is not a wall. It's a promise to hold until you're ready. It draws you into yourself, rounds you, sings your edges into smoothness. Adhesion is the kindness of the world you touch, the leaf that lends you its green, the eve that shares its cool. Cohesion and adhesion keep company. They do not quarrel. They ask softly, "Are you ready?" Gravity answers with the patience of oceans, whenever you are. The balance is a careful handoff, like passing a sleeping child from one shoulder to another. No jolts, no drops, only a settling into what was always waiting. Your attention floats to the lip again. You lengthen a little more. The meniscus stretches, a held note. Every part of you leans, then leans back, the way a thought leans into a dream and checks to see if the dream will catch. The line that holds you thins to a silver thread, not resisting so much as reminding there is a rhythm to trust. The thread says, feel the last moments of being here, because they are precious. The pull below says, come home. You are not in a hurry. There is time to notice, time to feel the cool air sip at your surface, and time to watch the world blur in a soft lens, the way the room blurs when your eyes turn to clouds. Your breathing maps the forces. Inhale gathers, exhale releases. Inhale gathers, exhale releases. Each breath teaches the shape of this moment, how a roundness can rest on a point, how a pause can be a bridge. Listen, we will count together, not to command, but to cradle the timing that is already unfolding. The numbers are lanterns, spaced far apart on a quiet path. When I speak one, you may wait a long while before the next arrives. The space between is yours. 3. Hold. Like a lake after wind, smoothing itself, refusing to rush. In the space after 3, you can feel all the reasons to remain as you are. The comfort of contact, the sweetness of being held, the way this leaf, this ledge, this moment has carried you without question. Feel gratitude settle low and warm. Feel how the body unclenches when it knows it can take its time. 3 is the room that contains you, unthreatening and kind. 3 is the hand on your back that doesn't push. 2, softer. The thread lengthens. The curve of you becomes a slender bell, and every tiny vibration rings a frequency you can almost hear, the syllables of release forming, gentle and inevitable. Between 2 and 1, there is a meadow of quiet. Wander it. Let your thoughts move like cattle in the far distance, unhurried, grazing. Your eyelids lower another grain. Your jaw becomes heavy in the best way, anchored by rest. Even the small engines of attention dim to embers. 2 is the hush before rain, the quiet audience of trees. 1, everything is tender here. The field narrows to a warm point. You are waiting for your own timing. When you are ready, the pattern will change. Until then, the breath glides, the body settles, and the tiny filament that holds you remains a shimmering yes. In the precise present, there is nothing to do, only to know that the doing is already done, the way a pendulum already contains its turn. Maybe falling is not leaving. Maybe it's returning to a promise you made long before you were named. The words arrive like a remembered scent. You consider them with the whole surface of your being. You see that the promise is not a demand. It is a recognition. Water knows water. Rest knows rest. The journey is not exile, but reunion. Not an ending, but a becoming more true. You are not falling down, but falling through. Through the thin skin of wading into the open palm of what holds you. Through the idea that you must hold yourself together, into the direct feeling that the world is already holding you. Through the small gate of thought into the wide garden of sensation. Through the wire into the air. Notice how those words unclasp a buckle inside your ribs. Notice how the mind, proud of its scaffolds, smiles and chooses to set the last beam down. What persuades you to trust gravity tonight? The question is a feather, light enough to float, certain enough to land, and the answer, soft as a blanket turned down. The room holds you, the world holds you, your breath holds you. Say it inside your chest, where it can echo quietly. The room holds you, the world holds you, your breath holds you. Each phrase is a hand beneath you. Each phrase makes the thread thinner in a kind way. Now the open loop widens, not to rush you, but to show the generosity of future paths. Where will you land? A leaf, tender and cupped, catching you like a friend's palm. A river, wide-backed and humming, carrying you toward open questions. Or the open sea, breath of tides, heart of collective memory. You don't have to decide. The branching is part of the cradle. The not knowing is a kind of knowing, the way a dream invites and is trusted before it tells its story. You can rest in the curve of possibilities as easily as you rest in a bed. You lengthen again. The silver filaments, so fine you could mistake them for light, draw out and thin, then draw out again. The voice that is physics whispers like a lover who knows your language. Cohesion says, I will keep you whole wherever you go. Adhesion says, I have loved touching you. Gravity says, I will love carrying you. None of them is trying to win. All of them are trying to care for you in their way. You do not have to take sides when everything is on your side. In your body, this becomes simple. The pillow is cool beneath your cheek. The sheet is smooth beneath your palm. You feel the mattress as a field that remembers your shape and says yes to it. You are allowed to sink. You are allowed to be heavy and sweet at the same time. The breath moves like a tide that knows the shore by heart. Nothing sudden, nothing sharp, only the natural rounding of minutes into rest. If there is a click, it is so small you almost miss it, the sound of a story choosing its next sentence. A tiny decision, a pearl of sound hidden in silence. The pattern recognizes the moment to change, and because you have listened so fully, the change is no surprise. It is the most familiar thing in the world finally arriving at the door you have been holding open. Go. Just that, almost silent. The word is not a shove. It's the soft lifting of a latch. With it comes a warm exhale that leaves like a quiet stream, uncoiling from the chest, untying the last knots in the neck, telling the shoulders they can melt into warmth without keeping watch. The body hears and does what it knows how to do. Soften, then soften more. Let the tongue rest. Let the eyes dim. Let the thoughts drift like pollen, then like nothing. Now you have left, and you have not left. You are still in the room, and the room is still in you. The support under you does not thin because you are lighter. It settles deeper, as if it too trusts the pull beneath. The first inch of flight is almost not flight at all, more a gracious bow, a slow curtsy to the edge that held you. It's slower than you expected, as if the world wants you to take one more look, to memorize the kindness of what you're leaving so you can recognize that kindness everywhere you go. In this near floating, you feel the architecture of rest assemble around you. The ceiling becomes a sky that is willing to darken. The corners of the room blur into forgiving shapes. The clock, if there is one, turns from a guard into a lighthouse you no longer need to see. The breath continues its steady benevolence. Heat gathers where you most need it. A knee, a shoulder, the small of the back, little hearths kindled by attention's retreat. Paths open quietly below. Leaf, river, sea. Each sings a welcome like a lullaby you half remember from a time before memory. The leaf hums of nearness and stillness, the way tiny worlds live on small surfaces. The river hums of guidance, of being led without being lost. The sea hums of vastness that includes you without asking you to be anything but the shape you are. The choice is not a test. It is a promise that wherever you arrive, you will be met. Trust gently that your whole day has been leading to this soft release. The questions folded themselves and set themselves on the dresser. The lists curled up like sleeping animals. The small engines of control were thanked and turned off. In the quiet that remains, there is more than enough room for you to be carried. You do not have to participate in every thought that wanders by. You can watch them tilt over the edge and find their own way down, like curious leaves experimenting with wind. Let the countdown's glow fade into the background, a row of little stars you can still point to if you like. You are past the numbers now, into the music underneath them. Your body is the instrument that knows how to play slowly. Your mind is a listener who no longer needs to ask for the title of the song. Everything belongs to this pace. Even time agrees to dress in softer cloth. And as you drift through the first inch, so gentle, so considerate, you begin to feel the hush of tomorrow, not as pressure, not as a gate closing, but as a garden already watered. The patience you'll need is arriving early, like a friend who shows up to carry the light things so you don't have to. The day ahead is not demanding you now. It is learning from you how to be quiet. It watches your slow descent and practices waiting. The edge is behind you, and still it blesses you. The air is in front of you, and it, too, blesses you. The room, the world, your breath, each continues to hold. And in the slow, hesitant beginning of flight, you discover the most generous secret. Letting go is another name for being held even more. You are moving, and it barely feels like moving. The first inch is a courtesy, a soft bow to inertia, a promise that nothing will startle. Your shape gathers itself tighter as you travel, rounding from the stretched bell to a calm globe, as if remembering an old posture of ease. The air does not oppose you, it greets you. Drag is a hand spread wide, not to stop you, but to feel you, to learn your edges, to keep you centered in your own path. Even gravity, sure as a heartbeat, speaks in small syllables. Now, now, now. No rush, only sequence. This is what trust sounds like inside the body. Muscles that had been listening for instructions hear only kindness and decide to be quiet. The forehead smooths. The tongue rests on the floor of the mouth. The throat forgets to hold itself up and discovers that nothing falls apart when it lets the breath pass like a visitor who knows the house. Shoulders drop in increments so gentle they resemble settling snow. You are still here, still held, and the world is doing more than half the work. You notice that leaving a place does not erase the place. The lip that carried you remains a memory of warmth, a geometry of support that keeps existing even as distance grows. In your chest, this becomes a simple proof. You can let go and still be connected. You can drift and still belong. The mind, relieved of inventory and guard duty, nods and drifts toward the window where night is practicing being even softer. Somewhere below, possibility fans out like quiet paths through tall grass, leaf, river, sea. Each option is both specific and generous. The leaf is close, a perch of green patience. It offers arrival without travel, and you can feel its stillness calling to a stillness in you. The river is guidance, a forwardness that doesn't require steering. It promises to carry your shape without asking you to become anything else. The sea is breadth that refuses to be a task. You would not have to measure. You would only have to belong. The branching is not a test. It is a lullaby sung in 3 harmonies, each true, each aloud. You continue, and the movement continues to be the slowest sort of yes. The small click that came with release becomes something you can almost taste, a tiny sweetness like the last note of a bell after the bell is silent. The room, attuned to your pace, becomes rounder at the corners. Every object loosens its outline. Even time seems to consent to your speed, slipping out of its shoes and walking barefoot so the floor won't creak. What persuades you to trust gravity tonight? Perhaps it is the way the air cupped you the moment you asked. Perhaps it is the way the mattress made itself wider under your weight. Perhaps it is the way breath has been practicing surrender for you all day. Lungs that gather, then give back, with no loss to either motion. The room holds you. The world holds you. Your breath holds you. Repeat them once more, soft as mist, and feel the 3 phrases braid together, under you like a quiet net that moves as you move. Even the part of you that likes to measure can relax here. If you needed numbers, they would arrive as reassurance. How a small sphere meets a gentle sky and is shaped by it. How tension becomes contour rather than cage. How the pull that guides you is the same pull that keeps every horizon honest. But tonight numbers prefer to be lullabies. Equations hum themselves into feelings. Balance is a cradle. Equilibrium is a bed that fits. You are not falling down, but falling through a membrane of watchfulness into the wider body of rest. Through the story that says you must manage every angle into the truth that you are already contained. Through the outline of the day into the spaciousness that was beneath it all along. This throughness is not a tunnel. It is a meadow. You don't have to aim. You only have to continue allowing. If a thought knocks, you can watch it step to the same lip you just left. See how it bows to the same physics. It lengthens, holds, is thanked, and then, with a tiny consent, goes. You don't have to push. You've learned the word already. Go is not a shove. Go is a kindness that releases both directions. The thought goes its way, and you go yours, which is deeper in. The first inch becomes the second without announcement. The small acceleration is so friendly it feels like being tucked. Your interior weather changes 1 degree toward calm. The belly warms, the back sinks by a whisper. If your mind looks for proof that it's safe to sleep, it finds a proof everywhere it looks, in the steady gait of breath, in the weight that is permitted to be weight, in the way attention floats like a lantern that knows it will be set down gently. Your sense of identity loosens the tight knot and becomes a ribbon. Maybe falling is not leaving, maybe it's returning to a promise you made long before you were named. The phrase returns like a raft you can lie on. What is the promise? To remember that you are water, and every path you take is a path toward water. To remember that rest is not the opposite of living, but one of its most faithful forms. To remember that surrender is not defeat, but a reunion with what keeps everything in place. The leaf is very near now, or the river is beginning to hum louder, or the sea is opening its quiet door. You don't need to choose which story is truest. They are 3 translations of the same invitation. Your body chooses for you in the oldest way, by matching what it needs with what is offered. Nearness, guidance, vastness, each is a holding. Each says, stay as you are and arrive. As you descend, the day behind you loses its edges, like a coastline in fog. Not lost, held at a distance that is appropriate for resting. Questions that wanted answers begin to want sleep instead. Lists that wanted completion begin to want silence. Even memory, faithful and busy, agrees to place its books face down and dim the lamp. The mind does not need to be convinced. It only needed to be accompanied to the door. You continue to fall through, and the world continues to rise to meet you. This is the secret you are already keeping. Letting go and being held are not different gestures viewed from opposite sides. They are the same gesture perfected by timing. You feel the timing working on your behalf, like tides that remember the moon without looking up. The last reserves of effort loosen. You do not tumble, you settle. You do not hurry, you align. If this were a story about danger, there would be noise and flailing. It is not. It is a story about belonging, and so it's quiet. The sound is a breath that leaves and returns, a very small weight rearranging itself toward comfort. The pace is the pace of a leaf choosing a lower branch, a river rounding a stone, a sea inhaling under a soft wind. The arc you draw is graceful because it never needed to be anything else. Already, the patience you'll need for tomorrow is teaching itself inside you, lining its pockets with slow. The first inch of flight has become several, and with each fraction, the promise repeats itself in subtler ways. You will be met. You will be carried. You can sleep. not falling down, but falling through worry into warmth, through planning into presence, through edges into curves. You are moving, and then you are being held. The room holds you, but the world holds you, not your breath and holds you. Let that be the last counting you do. The rest is only continuation. The rest is only deepening. The rest is only rest. You are falling, and it is not what you thought falling would be. The first inches of release were slow, like stepping into a warm pool, but now the air is fully with you, around you, beneath you, not as opposition but as company. This is not a plunge, not a rush, not the breath-snatching drop you may have imagined. This is the long exhale after years of holding it in. Terminal velocity, the phrase that sounds like an ending, is in truth a settling, a handshake between pull and hold, a truce written in the language of balance. Gravity asks, air answers. The two decide to share you. Motion steadies into grace. Drag is not a blunt force here. It is silk unspooling, wrapping you in its measured friction, a soft robe that keeps you from moving too quickly for your own comfort. Buoyancy, yes, even in air, is the palm under your round belly, lifting just enough to keep the descent tender. Each molecule you pass seems to know you are delicate and rare, and so they arrange themselves with care, slowing and smoothing your path. You fall and float at once, both held and guided, the paradox resolved into something your body already understands. Time itself changes texture here. In the hours you've lived so far, seconds have been quick beads slipping down a string. Now they thicken, syrup slow, stretching so you can taste each one as it passes. The clock doesn't tick, it flows. Minutes do not hurry past. They curve like a river around you, holding you in a current that does not require swimming. You find that inside this thickened time, you can notice everything. The cool brush of eddies along your sides, the low hum of turbulence flickering at your edges, the micro eddies that sing against you in lullaby tones, as if the air were stroking a cheek it loves. The world tilts and moves below you, panning slowly, like a film reel projected at half speed. From this height, roofs look like a pattern of quiet scales, each a shade of gray that has learned patience from weather. A river glints far away, a loose thread waiting to be tied into your story. Streets lie in still ribbons. Trees shift their leaves in slow applause. The horizon is patient, the sky indulgent. You drift, you descend, you drift again. You are both in motion and in observation, and there is no urgency to decide which is truer. Maybe falling is just a slower way of arriving. The thought appears as easily as breath, and then the question turns to you, warm and genuine. Is it for you too? The moment it asks, your pillow becomes cooler against your cheek, your jaw loosens without asking permission, your breath steadies into something the body can keep doing, even without your attention. The drop's journey mirrors your own, a descent that is neither escape nor defeat, but a movement toward exactly where you're meant to be. Somewhere inside this descent, an open question hums. What will be the first thing you hear when you land? Will it be the choir of leaves, each voice a soft consonant in the green language of trees? Will it be tin roofs, drumming bright staccato in welcome? Will it be the soil yawning open to take you in, the low and generous sound of a door being unlocked? You do not have to answer now. The question itself is a kind of music, and it will keep playing until it's ready to resolve. Sound shifts as you turn gently in the air. The cello hushes to a near breath, a long bow drawn without pressure. A faint binaural sweep moves left, then right, as though you are slowly rolling in a cradle of wind. Somewhere deep in the mix, a soft noise gate breathes with you. Inhale, close, exhale, open, until breath and world feel like the same motion. This, too, is part of the truce. The awareness that motion can be seamless, so smooth you can forget the edges between one thing and the next. Not surrender, but belonging. The phrase curls itself around your descent, shaping how you feel the air on your surface, how you let your weight be weight. You are not giving yourself up to something foreign. You are being received by something you have always been part of. The drop is not falling to meet the world. The world is rising to meet the drop. In the thickened river of time, you are met over and over, each moment a hand extended, and somewhere just ahead, close enough to scent, far enough to keep mystery, there is impact. You do not rush toward it. You let the breath that sounds like rain carry you the rest of the way. Each molecule of air you touch seems to say, not yet, not yet, not yet, until the only answer left is yes. Stay, just as you are, easy in the dark, easy in your breath, easy in the way the world sets you down like something fragile and cherished. You are being returned to yourself. Gently, surely, quietly, you listen to the small architecture of comfort, how fabric remembers the shape of your rest, how your shoulders lower without a single task tugging at them, how your face forgets to hold any expression at all and becomes moon smooth. You were never required to carry the day across the night. You may set it down, and the night will keep it safe until morning. You are allowed to become light. You are the listener at the edge of rain. You are the doorway where silence steps inside. You are the shoreline where thought becomes mist. Maybe you are the pause itself, the soft clearing between one idea and the next, and in that clearing the first vowel of a drop begins to form. The body learns this music quickly. Inhale like a gathering. Exhale like a letting go. Inhale like a rounding. Exhale like a smoothing. You can feel the tempo of a hydrologic lullaby arrive in you, the way promises arrive, softly at first, then with steadiness that feels like truth. You do not need to name the notes, only trust that the melody knows your name. There is a superstition you can release, the one that says you must hold everything together. Surface tension will do that for you tonight, that thin, invisible kindness that cups what would otherwise scatter, the same patience that shapes a bead at the rim of a leaf, the same patience that shapes your thoughts into gentle circles instead of sharp corners. You are held, and because you are held, you can rest. Maybe patience is a physics that feels like love. You can sense the world outside moving at a humane speed, a speed chosen for you, not against you. The air is a calm companion, a cool lull that never questions. Time stretches long as a river bend, not a ruler, not a clock, a current you simply float upon. You are good at floating. Your body remembers, your mind remembers, the way you once lay on your back in water, and the water said, "I've got you." Notice how thoughts arrive now, rounded at the edges, unhurried, each one a small boat passing at dusk. The shore you stand on is patient. You wave. The boat glides by. The wake subsides. The water smooths itself again. You do nothing to make it smooth. Smoothing is what water knows. You are the sky thinking of rain. You are the sea thinking of cloud. You are the tender corridor between them, a corridor lined with breath. Each breath says yes, and then yes again, and then yes once more, until agreement becomes climate, and climate becomes rest. Perhaps the oldest memories you carry are water memories, the hush of the world before words, the buoyant dark where heartbeat and tide were the same. Maybe that is why the sound of your own breath is enough. Maybe that is why a single, slow inhale can open a door that requires no key. You are already traveling, without leaving. Your room is still, but beneath that stillness you are a river, a soft migration from day to night, from many to one, from effort to ease. Time does not have to be conquered. It offers to carry you like a long, low wave that does not break. Not tonight, not here. Let the mind's catalog close. Let the index of worries slide back into the shelf. Forget the paragraph. and remember only the quiet between sentences. Forget the headline and remember only the human breath behind every story. This forgetting is a kindness, not an erasure, a promise to meet everything again, better rested, better tended. Maybe you have been practicing release all day without noticing, each blink a tiny letting go, each step a weight traded from one foot to the other, every hour a page turned. Tonight is simply the hour that teaches you to notice, and noticing becomes its own form of rest. Be the witness to small blessings, the coolness at your wrists, the warmth gathered where your hands meet, the way the darkness feels soft rather than empty, the way a single memory arrives without sharpness, someone laughing in another room years ago, a scent you can't name but recognize completely, the feeling of a quiet that loves you back. You're allowed to be simple. You are allowed to need nothing. You are allowed to be carried by things you can't see. The world's most faithful carriers are invisible: air, gravity, the tenderness that keeps molecules near each other when they could fly apart. You belong to these carriers, and they do not tire. There is a promise folded into all of this, the promise that what gathers will one day travel, and what travels will one day return. The same promise glows inside the word you have been circling. Drop, a name that is both a verb and a noun, both the motion and the thing, both the letting go and the one who lets go. You understand it without analysis, because your breath understands it already. Maybe the future is softer than you expected. Maybe the next hour is already fond of you. Maybe your pillow has been practicing all day to hold the shape of your ease. Trust small luxuries, the angle that feels inevitable, the mouth relearning how to part for quiet, the eyes remembering how to close without guarding the door. Remember the grammar of tonight: whispers as punctuation, ellipses for breath, dashes for warmth, space for kindness. The language of rest is generous. It leaves margins. It leaves room for you to write nothing at all. And in that spaciousness, meanings gather like vapor, and without strain, without effort, they condense into a beginning. You are the cloud's cradle. You are the sea's promise. You are the path between them. Every inhale lifts a little. Every exhale gathers a little, until lifting and gathering are the same gesture spoken in two dialects of ease. Hold the first question lightly. Let it glow, but do not grip. Where does a water drop begin? Is it the sky or something older? You do not have to choose. You can rest at the threshold where choosing is unnecessary, where beginnings are circles and circles are invitations. And if a drop remembers, if a drop truly keeps a quiet archive of its wandering, what does it remember first? The warmth that lifted it, the promise that held it, or the moment it learned your name? Impact is written as music. A single body meets a surface and becomes arrangement. A rim lifting into a brief, bright crown, tiny arpeggios of droplets, filament notes drawn thin, then released. The ear feels it before it understands, an intake of breath that lands as hush, then the faintest choir starting from the center and walking outward. You whisper, "Mic drop physics," and the phrase makes you smile even if no sound leaves your mouth. A microphone dropped is all weight and confession, and here the confession is water telling how it spent its fall. Energy unspools into concentric measures, a ripple staff carrying the beat farther and softer, until contact becomes chorus, and chorus becomes memory. The listener hears it as a place they once knew without knowing its name, a roof remembered from childhood, tin or tile, the lullaby of rain counted like sheep. Back then, the counting was an accidental metronome, 1, 2, 3, eyes getting heavy as the pattern taught the heart to hum along. You say, you hear the roof rain and feel your heartbeat match it, and now the heartbeat obeys, falling into step with the percussion that prints itself on every surface. Not a drum line, not a storm's command, a low, patient ostinato, kind enough to carry bodies toward rest. A single drop can make a choir if you listen close enough. The line hangs like the crown's rim itself, a coronation flashing and vanishing, the moment a singular becomes plural without losing its signature. That is the paradox you hold gently before the listener. The one becomes many and still remains itself in pattern. The crown is gone, but its grammar stays, teaching the ear how to expect the following notes, how to know the family resemblance when splashes arrive on leaf, on metal, on stone. It foreshadows a delta, one current dividing and recombining, branching into choices that are less like forks than harmonies. Listen to the microarchitecture. Surface tension offers a stave and inertia writes the first measure. The rim lifts. Crownlets bead into satellite notes, some springing away as bright staccato, some curving back to rejoin the pool in a legato commitment. The thin jets fling themselves outward, then pinch, necking they call it. So a single strand births twins, triplets, each a bell with its own pitch, depending on how much weight, how much speed, how quickly the neck lets go. Those that return are the quiet consonants. Those that fly are the brief vowels. All of them together spell impact as a word you feel along the skin. Wetting angles change adhesion's story with a sensual patience. On some surfaces, the contact angle is shallow. The drop relaxes its posture and lies down to be held. On others, it stays tense, perched and proud, reluctant to surrender its shape. Adhesion and cohesion are dancers trading lead. Momentum is the drummer who won't rush. You don't need the math to know it. The body recognizes the slope of a threshold. See how the metal calls for a clean consonant ping, while the slate murmurs a velvet thud, and the leaf offers a whisper that curls at the edges. The mix is wide and soft, because the world is wide and soft when you agree to hear it that way. The first crown is not a peak, but a tuning fork. You try your pulse against it and find it willing to slow. The ear takes the role of conductor, inviting the rest of you to follow. Let the breath lengthen, let the shoulders lower, let the jaw unclench. Percussion is often imagined as urgency, but here it becomes the metronome of calm. Each droplet a patient tick, each reflection a talk. Between them is a little hallway of silence, where the mind can pass without jostling. You don't have to do anything. You've already arrived. The water has been falling long before you began to listen, and it will keep falling after you stop. The crown, brief coronation, hints at a kingdom of roots waiting beyond the parapet. Leaf to leaf, a soft handoff, like one singer giving another a note in perfect tune. Gutter to spout, a narrow throat where the melody tightens for a bar, then opens again into a wider room of air. Stone to soil, consonant to vowel, impact to absorption, the consonant lips softening into a vowel mouth that holds the tone without edges. These are choices not of will, but of angle and texture. Where the edge sharpens, the drop leaps. Where the angle softens, it settles. Where the microgrooves widen, it lingers and gathers companions, heavy enough to change the next decision. Memory keeps slipping in, and that is not a mistake. The body keeps a library of reins. The first roof you ever knew taught you the simplest score, loud when close, gentle with distance, order nested in seeming accident. You counted until sleep found you, and the sleep was not a withdrawal, but a deeper listening, a place where the percussion wrote inside your chest. Tonight, the same writing returns, but now you can name the letters if you wish. Rim, jet, satellite, recoalescence, run-in, cling, release. You can also throw the letters into the air and let them fall as rhythm only, a biscuit of small bells that know their work. Now rest. Let the percussion fade. Do not force the quiet. Allow it. Lengthen the spaces between your inhales and your exhales like alleyways where the rain can pool without rushing. The space between notes is part of the song. The pause lets the last droplet resolve into the surface. the ring down of its pitch disappearing into warmth. Nothing is being taken from you. Something is being given. Slack, drift, a kind of soft permission. The parasympathetic system, the part of you that knows how to settle without command, hears the invitation and accepts. The longer pauses are not empty. They are seats reserved for you. Shoulders unclasp, the mind unbuttons its collar, and the sound grows finer as attention grows kinder. On the eaves, the rhythm subdivides into lace. On the leaves, tremor replaces thump, a shiver that is never cold, a hush that smells green even in the dark. On the roof, the bass line holds the room together while the decorative notes travel and return. The neighborhood joins in without asking. Distant pavement murmurs, a downspout speaks in syllables, a window screen turns drop to brush. Nothing crowds anything else. Every texture has a lane where it can be itself without pushing. If you listen closely, you will notice the narrative tilting, measure by measure, toward earth. Not a plunge, a yielding. The water gathers on a lip until weight becomes decision, then slides. The edge glistens because it is both boundary and invitation, because edges are where stories turn. Gravity is not a command here. It is a promise kept. When the drop commits to the slide, the music lowers its center of gravity too. The notes warm, the echoes shorten, the air surrenders its role as primary resonator to surfaces that hum lower and longer. You can follow without effort. Your hearing walks the incline, unhurried. The roof's hard consonants soften into the leaf's fricatives, soften again into the soil's vowels to be. Each transfer loses a little brightness and gains a little body, like the way lantern light grows deeper as the night admits it. You don't need to push the story ahead. It will arrive at the ground in its time, gather itself along the way, and decide how to be many without losing the one. The slide is beginning, and the dark below is not threat but welcome, a room where footsteps are muffled and the floor itself sings back in sympathy. Notice how repetition doesn't repeat so much as ripen. The pattern returns with small differences. Crownlets taller when the drop fell farther, microjets thinner when the film is taut, satellites more eager when the rim's lift is brisk. Momentum spreads like dye in water, shading every adjacent surface with a share of the same first note. Some droplets arc away and cool into pearls before reuniting. Some land and wander, nibbling at edges, testing what will hold them. Recoalescence is not an afterthought. It is the chorus returning, voices folding back into the chord that made them. Wedding angles keep turning pages in adhesion's story. Hydrophilic faces invite a yielding posture. Hydrophobic ones ask the drop to keep its spine. A tilt of a few degrees decides whether a bead pauses to gather friends or slips at once into travel. The smallest ridges become sentences, the tiniest dust becomes punctuation. The skin of water reads them all. In this reading, your body follows the syntax. Where the drop lingers, you linger. Where it releases, you exhale. Where it splits, your attention briefly divides, only to sink again on the downbeat. On leaf, the percussion wears velvet. The note begins with a kiss, not a knock. Then the leaf's trembling spreads the impact into micro-tremors that soften the attack and lengthen the tail. On metal, the consonant brightens. The timbre turns bell-like, fast to ignite and quick to fade, leaving a clean gap where rest can sit undisturbed. On slate, the sound arrives like low speech, rounded edges, weight forward, a resonance that asks the chest to answer. Mixed wide and soft, these textures braid without crowding, a stereography of weather that invites your hearing to turn its head and find space. A single drop can make a choir if you listen close enough. 1,000 drops can make a single hush if you widen your listening. Both are true, and the mind calms when it can hold both truths in the same palm. You can move from solo to chorus and back without friction, attend the crown's quick coronation, then widen until distinctions blur and the rain becomes a room-size instrument, tuning you by presence alone. The quiet inside the sound is the same quiet that waited in you all day, an empty chair finally warmed by someone sitting. Now rest, let the percussion fade, stretch the interval between one sound and the next until it becomes a field. Let the shoulders slope like a roofline under soft weight. Let the tongue lie easy, the throat open, the breath draw and release as if the ribs themselves were eaves. The parasympathetic tide rises, slow, certain, a warm hand smoothing grain. If thought arrives, give it a seat near the window and let it listen too. It will tire of commentary and soften into hearing. The roofline under a gentle glow takes the role of horizon. Along its edge, droplets cue and gather. Surface tension writes little bridges between neighbors until two become one, coalescence as forgiveness. Weight finds its sum, and the sum becomes decision. The bead rounds, the contact line relaxes, and movement begins without announcement, no push, only permission from gravity's patient grammar. The slide is a legato phrase, not a fall, not a stumble, but a vowel-sustained warmth shaped by contour. Leaf to leaf is a handoff performed in kindness. The first leaf trembles, offers its gathered water along the lowest vein, and the second receives the note already warmed. Each exchange makes a softer attack until the line is more breathing than striking. Gutter to spout is a narrowing that clarifies. There the rhythm tightens, rapid syllables, bright and close, then opens at the mouth in draped strands of tone. Stone to soil is consonant to vowel again, edge to body, a vanishing of hard outlines into something that holds and hushes. Mic-drop physics, you think, and smile again without sound. Not spectacle but surrender, not drama but precision made gentle. The splash crown is a brief theater of sovereignty, then succession, one form becoming many and returning. You can say the words, momentum, adhesion, angle of contact, but they are ultimately just ways to point at a kindness. Forces that could jar instead cradle, impulses that could scatter instead compose. The science stays dreamy because the dream is not ignorance. It is trust that the meanings underneath will do their work while you rest. Memory keeps its own metronome. Somewhere the childhood roof goes on being counted. 1, 2, 3. Now you are older and can stop counting without losing the lullaby. The heart learns the tempo without tally. Sleep approaches not as a gate, but as a gradient, the way sound fades after it has done its shaping. If you do not arrive all at once, you arrive truly. The long road of pauses brings you here. Now rest. Let the percussion fade even further. Allow distance to grow between the bright notes on metal and the near whisper on leaf, so that each finds its true size. Notice how the slate speaks at the pace of weathered things, slow attack, patient decay, warmth left in its wake. The more you allow, the less you need to manage. This is the ease of listening rather than hearing, receiving rather than tracking. Tilt toward earth with the sound. Follow the gleam along the rim where water collects, the small glistening that is both light and promise. The edge is a teacher. It proves that boundaries can guide without resisting. Over the lip, downward becomes forward, and forward becomes home. The air briefly braids through the falling ribbon, a filigree of hush, and then the first grains of soil touch and take. Impact is no longer a strike. It is an agreement. In the ground's first centimeters, the music changes register. Granules speak in capillaries, pores with throats and rooms, paths that welcome by narrowing just enough to hold. The drop's perimeter wavers, then lengthens into filaments that thread among particles and wrap them into a temporary union. Cohesion loosens, Adhesion deepens. The circle becomes a network. Motion becomes resonance. The echo shortens until it is only warmth, the kind you feel more than hear, the kind that asks the deepest parts of you to unclasp. Stone gives way to soil. Soil gives way to dark that is not absence but shelter. The percussion that carried you here is now a heartbeat felt in the wrist of the earth. If you place your attention there, you can almost sense the quiet arithmetic underway. Water counted by roots, measured by hunger, held where holding keeps life from breaking. You do not need to see it. Listening is enough. In this listening, choice completes itself without strain. Hold the last line like breath at the top of an inhale. The crown has fallen, the choir continues in smaller rooms, and the roof rain is a memory pressed like a leaf in a book you can open whenever you wish. If you attend, the refrain remains true. A single drop can make a choir if you listen close enough. The choir has delivered you to the threshold, the edge that glistens before it softens, the slide that writes your name into quiet ground. Now rest. Let the percussion fade to almost nothing. Let the spaces between notes expand until spaces are all you notice, and even those become texture rather than gap. The body will take the hint. The night will do the rest. The sound lowers its eyes, and the soil receives the gaze without hurry. Another question arrives and chooses not to answer itself yet. A door you are invited to approach later, perhaps from a dream, perhaps from the next rain. What does the underground feel like when the world is sleeping? The world goes dim, gentle, subterranean. Light becomes a suggestion, sound a low mineral hum, and you guide your attention downward until the air itself feels textured. The drop you've been following loosens its edge and meets the first open mouths of earth, pores that are not holes, but corridors. Capillary action takes the hand, pulling water the way lullabies pull eyelids down, steady and small and sure. Names soften as you enter: loam, silt, clay. The syllables arrive like padded steps, a vocabulary designed for quiet. Pores narrow into throats and widen into rooms. Between the mineral grains, menisci curve like crescent moons, each curve a promise that surface tension keeps. The drop leans into those curves, pauses where the crescent is tight, then passes where the crescent relaxes, a traveler reading doorways by feel rather than map. You find yourself whispering the cadence that fits the movement and calms the chest, down through loam, down through stone, down into patience. The triplet walks your breath into even measure. The long muscles listen and let go. Hydrology without the chalkboard. Percolation slows as the paths grow finer. Gravity still beckons, but it speaks through wicks and threads now, not through falls. The soil matrix offers both invitation and restraint. Every grain is a host with boundaries. Adsorption lays a brief hand on the shoulder. Stay, be held, then yields, because yielding is how the network moves water from one kindness to the next. Where pores neck, movement pauses into listening. Where contact angles change, a decision is made without hurry. The journey becomes a sequence of almosts that add up to arrival. Minerals keep the oldest stories. Quartz speaks in clear consonants. Feldspar warms its vowels. Clays are patient librarians whose shelves swell and sigh with weather. Iron is the quietest narrator, rust offering a faint taste of time. They do not argue, they convene. Each surface reshapes the drop's edge for a moment, borrowing its outline the way a page borrows light. The drop learns the archive by touch, the way a fingertip knows the grain in wood. Old rivers live here as ghosted channels between particles. Ancient rains left their gloss like marginalia. Inside the pores, pressure is not push, but preference. Water goes where it is most welcome. The smallest spaces often call the loudest. Their capillary pull out singing gravity for a few centimeters. A few more, then less as the pull is satisfied. This is not a race. It is a conversation in which pauses carry half the meaning. Percolation is the pacing of patience itself, and because your body recognizes good pacing when it meets it, your thoughts copy the rhythm. The busier ideas, once tumbling, begin to space themselves out. Their edges round off. They drift and sort. They find places to rest that are not exits, but shelves. You don't need to see the network to trust it. Close attention is enough. The drop threads a throat no wider than a hair, then enters a wider chamber where grains sit at 3-point meetings, making little saddle bridges for the meniscus to drape across. The curve tightens, pressure rises, the drape slips, and forward becomes down again by a fraction. Some water clings to a clay plate and stays because staying is what that plate knows how to teach. Some continues because paths exist for continuing. Nothing is wasted. Even pauses are part of transport. Down through loam, down through stone, down into patience. Say it again and feel how the phrase lowers heat in the mind. Loam, where organic crumb makes rooms with forgiving walls. Stone, where mineral law teaches clarity without cruelty. Patience, where time has the biggest table and sets a place for everything that agrees to wait. With each descent, you trade brightness for depth, speed for sense, noise for tone. The hum deepens until you can't tell whether you're hearing or remembering it. Aquifers wait below like living libraries, stacks of held water, volume written in layers, access by pores and fractures rather than door. They are not static. Books are always being returned and borrowed. Some shelves are unconfined, breathing with the seasons. Others are bound between clay and stone, pressurized like a secret that will tell itself when the first well asks kindly. You say this plainly, and it is plain enough to be restful. The ground knows how to keep what it is given and how to give it back. The emotional weather cools with the descent. Thought temperature drops to contemplative. Edges grow accurate and kind. You sense the menisci as small silver commas pausing water into sense, and you notice your own mind inserting commas of its own, slight hesitations that make a sentence kinder to read. Curved pauses change meaning. Curved pauses change mood. You open a question and place it in the hallway like a lamp for later. How long can a drop wait? You promise the answer belongs to a much deeper room, one we will visit when the body has drifted further. A future shelf in the library, a thumb left at a page. The curiosity warms, but does not agitate. It sits like a small coal under ash, ready to glow when you lift it again. Maybe waiting is not empty. Maybe it's the way water learns your name. You say it for the listener and for yourself, and the phrase finds purchase in both soils. Waiting is where contact becomes relationship, where the quick outline softens into fit, where memory can seep instead of splash. In the pores, waiting writes little treaties between water and world. In the mind, waiting lets shape appear without force. Busier streams of thought, those that love to sprint along the surface, discover there is room to be held without losing motion. Percolation is still movement. It is motion that respects the furniture of the world. Ideas settle in sequence. The loudest arrive first, then thin into murmurs, then become clarity at the bottom of a glass. A clear pool forms where earlier there was only swirl. You notice the difference between silence and clarity, and you prefer clarity because it still contains sound, just assembled. Soil names keep you company. Loam with its crumb and comfort, silt with its silk slow drift, clay with its close embrace, adsorption's gentle practice hand, pores as corridors, throats as thresholds, grains as rooms where time has patience to spare. Every part of the matrix is an instrument that plays yes, but gently. You match your breath to that tempo without being told. Here, the world keeps working for you while you rest. Roots thread the same corridors, offering tiny pulses of draw that do not disturb so much as a line. Seeds negotiate silently with moisture, signing to tomorrow with nothing more than a swell. Microbes read, write, erase, and write again, all at human unnoticeable volumes. You are permitted to do nothing while everything else continues the work you started by listening. Let the low hum go lower. Let brightness concentrate into small, slow-moving diamonds of wet in darkness. Let the eye of attention soften until it matches the curvature of a meniscus and stops arguing with it. No diagram needed. The physics are lullaby-shaped from here. Pull, pause, release, hold, yield, hold. The ground keeps its promises. The water keeps its shape long enough to change it. Down through loam, down through stone, down into patience. Stay with the third step long enough for it to become a place you can return to. The pores are not endless. They are enough. The library is not finished. It is open. And you, reader of reins, are allowed to set this page down inside yourself and pick it up again when the deeper room calls. Tortuosity teaches an honesty. The way is not straight, but it is true. Path lengthens by curling. Progress hides inside detours. In these corridors, the drop learns to accept indirectness as efficiency at another scale. The meniscus leans, advances, leans again. Whenever a throat narrows, the curve sharpens into intention. Whenever it opens, intention relaxes into glide. Pressure is a whisper, not a shove. Matrix pull collects the small persuaders, texture, angle, grain, to compose a forward that feels like being welcomed rather than moved. Loam gives way to finer rooms. At the edges of clay, adsorption stills the outline into patience, tiles it to the plate in a mosaic of closeness. This pause is service, not a rest. In that held moment, ions trade brief names with surfaces, trace signatures in a language older than leaves. Then the bond breathes and lets go. What continues is not the same water it was at entry. Contact alters knowing. Passage writes inside the drop a memory of the world it touched. Roots arrive as companions, not interruptions. Their skins carry a whispering draw that tunes rather than takes. Around each root hair, moisture gradients form like halos. The pull is gentle, steady, enough to invite but not strip. The drop contributes and continues, part gift, part traveler. In the quiet, you realize this is what help looks like in a well-made system. Shared gradients, no fanfare. The mind copies the model. What can be given is given. What must remain to carry on remains. Wormwork opens occasional boulevards, macro pores where the pace quickens without violence. There the hum brightens, the menisci lengthen, and distance happens almost absent-mindedly. Then the path returns to fine braid, slowing, choosing, reading. Variation is the constancy. Between gravel lenses and clay seams, the rhythm modulates like a hymn-changing key while keeping its tune. Down through loam, down through stone, down into patience. You keep the triplet as a handle. With each recitation, the shoulders find another notch of ease. The forehead smooths as if a hand had passed and stayed. You notice attention becoming an instrument with fewer unnecessary strings, tuned to fewer, truer notes. The busier thoughts float, bump, and sort. The ones that never belonged here slip upward and away like air finding its rightful ceiling. Unsaturated becomes saturated in pockets, then unsaturated again. The boundary is not a line. It is a mood the soil enters and exits. Where water abundance fills the rooms, flow turns from capillary persuasion to gravity-aided drift. Where rooms empty, capillarity resumes the lead with intimate authority. Neither regime argues with the other. Both are chapters of the same descent. The body learns the same alternation, moments of letting go, moments of being held, each enabling the other. Aquifers are still below, Still library. On the way, perched tables appear, temporary shelves where water lingers above a stubborn, finer layer. There the drop waits with comrades, a small parliament of brightness, deciding nothing and becoming ready. Waiting acquires shape, not idling, but aligning. Perhaps this is what the phrase has been saying all along. Maybe waiting is not empty. Maybe it's the way water learns your name. The words return like a key in a familiar lock. The door opens into a room you already inhabit. Minerals keep counseling steadiness. Carbonates murmur of buffering. Quartz says clarity again without boredom. Iron nods at times red patience. Organic matter contributes softness, the kind that holds roundness without letting it blur. The result is a corridor where even friction is kind, resistance enough to register, not enough to erode spirit. Inside that measured touch, your thoughts find the same friction useful, just enough to slow, just enough to keep shape, nothing to scorch on. You lay the mid-arc question in view once more. How long can a drop wait? It glows like a watch face in a pocket, legible without being consulted. Not yet, you promise. There is a later designed for that answer, a deeper room with a wider table. The promise is a thread that does not snag. It is a path marker so the mind will not wander, looking for an exit it does not need. Sound becomes the sense of pressure, evening out. A faint mineral hymn runs through the scaffold of grains, not loud enough to name, steady enough to hold. In that steadiness, you notice the difference between boredom and peace. Boredom pushes against time. Peace lets time set the table. The latter is happening. The former drifts away like silt in a settled jar. In some passages, the meniscus takes the shape of a smile you only feel from the inside. In others, it sharpens into a crescent, intent on the next narrowing. Every curve is both instrument and record, a living line where geometry remembers movement. You mirror the geometry by letting your breath curve. No edges, no sharp corners, just roundness passing roundness. The chest agrees. The jaw stops narrating. The empowerment is quiet but present. The world keeps working for you while you rest. Roots drink without drama. Hyphae stitch food web lace across distances you would call small, until you learn how large small is down here. Seeds, given privacy and moisture, rehearse tomorrow's green under blackout curtains of soil. Microbes bargain and bless. Pebbles shoulder weather stories. Clay turns pages at a tempo set by rain. None of this asks for your help. All of it includes you. Ahead, the matrix opens by degrees, fractures widening, sands taking a looser set, the sense of storage growing as the walls lean back. The drop's pace answers the architecture. When rooms invite, it lingers like someone who knows they are safe. When channels beckon, it glides. You can feel a horizon you cannot see, the difference between many small holdings and one generous body. Thoughts reach that same difference. Previously separate considerations find the seam where they belong together. Concerns that wanted headlines accept footnotes and rest. One clear pool forms, not silence and not noise, but signal with space around it. In that pool, the question about waiting floats without anxiety, like a leaf that has learned the density of its water. If you tilt attention, you can sense head, the slight pressure of height that turns potential into availability. Aquifers hold head like quiet strength. You do not need to measure it to know it is there. The knowledge is restful precisely because it does not demand attention. It only asks trust. Trust is most convincing when it is embodied, and the body begins to believe. Down through loam, down through stone, down into patience. The cadence resolves to the final phrase and stays. Staying is the point. Not the length of it is not the count, but the quality. A staying that nourishes both traveler and house. The drop is close to joining hours rather than seconds, rooms rather than hallways. Your thinking joins hours rather than minutes, presence rather than plans. Let the visual field dim to a brightness that moves, barely, like a firefly behind a curtain. Let the hum go from heard to known. Let the words thin until the page shows through and the page is warm. The library extends below you, around you, into you, and the catalog is mercifully simple. Welcome, hold, release, repeat. Maybe waiting is not empty. Maybe it's the way water learns your name. Keep it. It will know where to find you, even in dreams, especially in dreams. Deeper, a breath. Patience releases as an artesian whisper. Not a shout, not a drum roll, just the underground loosening its careful hand. Pressure that once held now smooths, and the drop joins a laminar thread that knows which way light is, even before light is visible. What began as percolation becomes a gathered intent. You can feel it as a steadiness, more than emotion, a persuasion that doesn't need volume to be certain. A seep is first, no spectacle, only wetness resolving into direction. From seam to lip, from lip to small giving, the earth's margin glosses and begins to speak in syllables of water. The seep collects companions and turns trickle. The trickle tries a contour and finds its posture. The posture becomes a ribbon so soft that joining makes no sound of effort. Every addition is an agreement, not a torrent, a vow. This vow answers what the quiet root asked. Yes, a drop can wait. It can bide through seasons, through years arranged like rings in the dark, through pressure changes and mineral lessons. It can learn the patience of stone without becoming still. When release comes, it does not rush to prove it was worthy of the wait. It keeps the dialect of the underground, measured even tender toward edges, and brings that dialect back to air. Hydrostatic head is a soft palm between shoulder blades. Here, now, forward. You don't need the equation to feel the kindness of the push. Evenness is the law you hear without numbers. Darcy's quiet governance expressed as calm velocity, gradient translating into grace. The flow is bell-like in its clarity, a transparency that carries shape the way a good song carries silence around it. Nothing cloudy, nothing hurried. The mind trusts what it can see through. You notice your breath answer in kind. It chooses a smooth cadence without instruction, a lengthening that holds itself. Exhale turns legato. Inhale arrives as if it had been on its way all along. You don't need to rush to arrive. Flow like this is its own destination, and the body knows it. What pressed becomes what carries. What carried becomes what sings. You ride the firmness of the palm and feel the urge to prove yourself go quiet. Laminarity is the purr of a sleeping cat, continuous, quiet, complete in itself. Layers slide without quarrel, each keeping its lane, each respecting the neighbor's peace. No turbulence, no snag, just aligned intention. The mind, overhearing, starts to purr too. Thoughts that wanted to cross-stream choose parallel for a while. They discover that arriving is easier when the water doesn't argue with itself. The edges of worry stop catching. Accept footnotes and rest. One clear pool forms, not silence, not noise, but signal with space around it. In that pool, the question about waiting floats without anxiety, like a leaf that has learned the density of its water. If you tilt attention, you can sense head, the slight pressure of height that turns potential into availability. Aquifers hold head like quiet strength. You do not need to measure it to know it is there. The knowledge is restful precisely because it does not demand attention. It only asks trust. Trust is most convincing when it is embodied, and the body begins to believe. Down through loam, down through stone, down into patience. The cadence resolves to the final phrase and stays. Staying is the point, not the length of it, not the count, but the quality. a staying that nourishes both traveler and house. The drop is close to joining hours rather than seconds, rooms rather than hallways. Your thinking joins hours rather than minutes, its presence rather than plans. Let the visual field dim to a brightness that moves, barely, like a firefly behind a curtain. Let the hum go from heard to known. Let the words thin until the page shows through and the page is warm. The library extends below you, around you, into you, and the catalog is mercifully simple. Welcome, hold, release, repeat. Maybe waiting is not empty. Maybe it's the way water learns your name. Keep it. It will know where to find you, even in dreams, especially in dreams. Deeper, a breath. Patience releases as an artesian whisper. Not a shout, not a drum roll, just the underground loosening its careful hand. Pressure that once held now smooths, and the drop joins a laminar thread that knows which way light is, even before light is visible. What began as percolation becomes a gathered intent. You can feel it as a steadiness, more than emotion, a persuasion that doesn't need volume to be certain. A seep is first, no spectacle, only wetness resolving into direction. From seam to lip, from lip to small giving, the earth's margin glosses and begins to speak in syllables of water. The seep collects companions and turns trickle. The trickle tries a contour and finds its posture. The posture becomes a ribbon so soft that joining makes no sound of effort. Every addition is an agreement, not a torrent, a vow. This vow answers what the quiet root asked. Yes, a drop can wait. It can bide through seasons, through years arranged like rings in the dark, through pressure changes and mineral lessons. It can learn the patience of stone without becoming still. When release comes, it does not rush to prove it was worthy of the wait. It keeps the dialect of the underground, measured even tender toward edges, and brings that dialect back to air. Hydrostatic head is a soft palm between shoulder blades. Here, now, forward. You don't need the equation to feel the kindness of the push. Evenness is the law you hear without numbers. Darcy's quiet governance expressed as calm velocity, gradient translating into grace. The flow is bell-like in its clarity, a transparency that carries shape the way a good song carries silence around it. Nothing cloudy, nothing hurried. The mind trusts what it can see through. You notice your breath answer in kind. It chooses a smooth cadence without instruction, a lengthening that holds itself. Exhale turns legato. Inhale arrives as if it had been on its way all along. You don't need to rush to arrive. Flow like this is its own destination, and the body knows it. What pressed becomes what carries. What carried becomes what sings. You ride the firmness of the palm and feel the urge to prove yourself, go quiet. Laminarity is the purr of a sleeping cat, continuous, quiet, complete in itself. Layers slide without quarrel, each keeping its lane, each respecting the neighbor's peace. No turbulence, no snag, just aligned intention. The mind, overhearing, starts to purr too. Thoughts that wanted to cross-stream choose parallel for a while. They discover that arriving is easier when the water doesn't argue with itself. The edges of worry stop catching. The channel keeps its humility. Thin at first, almost shy, it threads a seam where moss keeps the rock face green and forgiving. Water doesn't force the door, it shines it. Beads gather along the nap and release in steady syllables, a whisper transcribing itself into the open. The ribbon learns its bed by touch, shallow, pale stone guiding with the lightest of slopes, tiny ribs teaching the water, a line that is both precise and relaxed. Sun, when it reaches, will cut the thread into clear stripes. For now, the thread goes on, lucid and sure, needing no witness to be true, not a torrent, a vow. You say it again because the phrase keeps the flow honest. The vow is to return as the same element altered by kindness. Patience turned into presence, pressure turned into offering. The return does not erase the underground. It carries the underground forward in the way it moves. That steadiness is a lesson you can borrow at any edge. Hold shape, share pace, meet the incline without bracing. Clarity becomes a sensation you can place on the tongue, cold without bite, clean without absence. The bell tone of spring water is not sound alone. It is a way of being seen. Pebbles below appear nearer than they are, as if transparency were a kind of generosity with distance. The world looks back through it without distortion, and that lack of distortion soothes. When vision doesn't have to work, the rest of you sets down the extra bags it didn't notice it was carrying. Under the vow, joining continues. Every microseep along the seam adds its consent. Edges darken where flow lingers, lightening again where the bed smooths and asks for glide. Nothing breaks, everything leans. Cohesion holds the line. Adhesion traces the bed's handwriting, and together they write a sentence that keeps its subject clear. Forward, softly. The ribbon grows without trying to be larger. It becomes more itself by including more. Maybe the voice you thought you lost was only traveling underground. The thought arrives as if the water had said it, and perhaps it did. Sound returns here as shape, the consonant of rock, the vowel of flow, the quiet breath between them. You do not need to raise your own voice to hear it. You only need to lean close enough that your listening fogs the air for a moment, a faint veil that proves warmth meets cool. What vanished hadn't vanished. It had been gathering meanings you can now understand. Patience is not erased by emergence. It is refined into oath. The oath is simple. Keep moving in a way that could be trusted by anything that touches you. The ribbon volunteers to be example. Its surface stays untroubled. Its interior, though full of paths and returns, resolves externally as peace. Pebbles accept their gloss without complaint. Lichens sip at the margin. The bed accepts the praise of light and gives it back as pattern. No one hurries. Arrival happens anyway. You don't need to rush to arrive. The sentence fits in the mouth the way the water fits in the channel. No forcing, no spare corners. Breathing keeps the same meter. Shoulders lower by one more notch you hadn't noticed was available. The ground that gave you to itself is now giving you back, not as a correction, but as a continuation. What is promised is kept plainly. A seam loosens, a page turns. The artesian whisper gathers its thread into something you could follow with a fingertip. The vow renews itself with every glittering addition, this and this and this. The world answers not with applause but with readiness, a place for the ribbon to lay down its line, a slope for quiet to travel, a length of morning waiting to be written in water. The vow keeps its cadence. What the earth promised in quiet, it returns in quiet. A line of water that does not argue with bed or light. The laminae lie like pages that never wrinkle, sheet over sheet, each bearing the next without complaint. Evenness is the message, gradient turned into grace, and you feel the assurance of it in your ribs, a tempo that refuses to rush because it has nothing to prove, not a torrent, a vow. The mossed rock face weeps light, drops collect along a velvet nap, and at their own interval surrender into the thread. Each surrender is soft consonant, meeting vowel. The sentence lengthens without raising its voice. The ribbon drafts a shallow channel in pale stone, a line so modest it could be missed unless you were looking for gentleness on purpose. Where the stone ribs, the water hums. Where it smooths, the hum becomes glass. Hydrostatic head presses like that soft palm again. Steady, kind, never theatrical, coaxing forward with the patience of someone who knows the door is already open. Darcy remains a rumor you can feel with your fingers. Push proportioned to path, resistance proportioned to texture, The law is in the evenness, and the evenness reads as trust. Pebbles keep their clarity under the flow, as if transparency were a bell you could ring with sight. When sun leans in, it cuts the surface into tidy stripes, bright, dim, bright, and orderly music scored in light. The bed answers by offering a clean staff to write on. Nothing flourishes in capital letters here. Everything speaks in lowercase and is understood. You don't need to rush to arrive. The sentence relaxes your shoulders again, and you discover there was still one more notch they could drop. Breath chooses the lane of least friction the way water does. Slow in, slower out. A purr without sound. Laminarity holds. Your thoughts keep their parallelism and discover that parallel is not separation, but coordination. The mind travels with the flow because the flow has made itself effortless to keep company with. Trickle to ribbon becomes a lesson in joining. Each micro-seep is an agreement signed in sunlight. Threads merge without collision, two lanes becoming one lane that is neither compromise nor conquest, just more capacity to keep being gentle. The widening doesn't change the character, it reveals it. Cohesion is the bridge. Adhesion is the handwriting. Together, they keep the sentence legible even as it lengthens. Maybe the voice you thought you lost was only traveling underground. Lean closer, and you can hear it in the water's diction. Clear vowels, rounded edges, the undertone of stone that taught it patience. You test the truth the simplest way. You breathe toward the ribbon. Morning meets spring in the air between fogs for a heartbeat, a small cloud drawn by warmth. The veil is familiar, childhood glass blooming under a palm, the soft oval you once traced with a fingertip to see the world more clearly inside the blur. The mirror returns here, not on a window, but on the very breath of the day, hinting that later, when the sky wears its own veil, you will know what to do with that reflection too. Clarity isn't emptiness. The water carries memory in solution. A hint of mineral reads as timbre, a bell that favors a silver over brass. Cold attends without cruelty, crisp enough to wake, kind enough to cradle. You could cup both hands and drink, and find the word enough printed on your tongue. Springs often keep a steady temperature, because the underground does. Stone is a measured friend, and that steadiness tells the body it can rely on this hour. Reliability, you realize, is its own form of warmth. The rock face is a teacher of proportions. Where the lip is thin, beads hang like notes held just long enough to be music. Where the lip thickens, the thread hushes into sheet, and the sound lowers into almost silence. You follow by listening more than looking, and the world agrees to be known that way. The channel's pale cut is a simple sentence. Subject, verb, no ornament, and yet the meaning refuses to run out. You understand why vows are spoken plain. What lasts does not need adjectives. Somewhere below, the library continues, but the book in your hands is this page. The artesian whisper keeps its pressure invisible and generous. Head becomes kindness, gradient becomes glide. You feel how waiting has been refined into motion you can love. The question from the root finds its answer not by argument, but by presence. Yes, a drop can wait. Through winters that wore their patience like wool, through summers that tasted of iron, and still return as song, not as apology. You don't need to rush to arrive. The phrase is a path you can keep, even when the ground changes. On bedrock, it's a line. On gravel, it's a braid. On grass, it's a dampness that remembers the thread beneath. Every place receives the vow in its own accent. Moss sips, lichens tint their halos, a spider sets one silk to another and learns what water weighs today. Nothing hurries, everything participates. Sun finds the seam more fully now. Clear stripes sharpen, move, and soften as a breeze edits the page. The ribbon brightens into something that looks like voice made visible, tonal, even confident without noise. You notice how easy it is to recognize yourself when recognition asks for nothing back. Maybe the voice you thought you lost was only traveling underground, gathering timbre, picking up the patience it needed to be believed when it returned. At the edge where the thread leaves stone for a brief run of air, you breathe again, and the spring answers with a second of cloud. A tiny mirror lifts and fades, and in the disappearance you feel the continuity, glass to breath to sky, all the same family of quiet veils. The memory of childhood window feels less like a past and more like a practice you've kept without noticing. Make a small fog when you need to see. Let it clear when you're ready to go on, not a torrent of vow. The words fit the mouth like water fits its bed, and saying them is the same as following them. The vow is to keep soft velocity, to be clean enough to show the world through, to carry the underground forward as steadiness instead of weight. The spring repeats the promise without repetition, syllable after syllable of clear, unforced arrival. You are invited without ceremony. The ribbon doesn't ask, it makes room. It is going where threads multiply, down a slope that will gather companions, across a flat where the light will widen into pattern, toward a joining place you don't have to name yet. Take the cadence with you, breath like laminar flow, step like even head, heart like a bell you can see through. Follow the ribbon forward where threads multiply. Scale widens the way breath does before a long word. Threads that once kept discrete lanes begin to read the valley together. Tributaries braid, brooks shake hands. The geometry of kinship appears as cursive writing along the floor of distance. You can feel the sentence lengthen underfoot, each loop of water signing its name into the same patient page. The joining is not a clash. It is recognition, familiar vowels meeting, consonants accommodating, syntax expanding without losing sense. Flow answers scale. The quiet laminar purr keeps its manners, but the numbers underneath turn the dimmer a click. Reynolds leans, smooth gathers tiny whirls and corners, not as rebellion, but as ornament, leaves of motion unfurling where edges invite them, a lace of rotation that keeps the main line honest. Transitional is not turmoil, it is detail. The ribbon learns to carry small subplots without losing the plot. Meanders arrive the way handwriting relaxes when the hand knows what it's saying. Curves lengthen into S shapes, one bend anticipating the next, like call and response. Secondary currents start their gentle crosstalk, helical drifts that lift, shifting grains and ideas without haste. Banks trade roles, one sculpted, one resting, then the roles reverse with the generosity of good partners. The valley takes the signature and keeps it, a record of patience with a flair for grace. You ask a question the water seems to overhear. Do you remember the other drops? Are they strangers or your older selves? The answer doesn't arrive as words. It arrives as joining. Every confluence feels like reunion because continuity is the secret the current keeps. A drop that waited in clay is cousin to a drop that ran bright over slate. Every path folds into the same vowel of forward. Confluence is kinship rather than collision. What meets does not erase. It becomes more legible by being read together. Eddies keep what matters. Little round rooms of memory swivel off the downstream shoulder of stones, keepsakes tucked where velocity softens. They catch leaf and light and let both turn slowly enough to be understood. Step into one with your attention, and you can hear the day's longer sentence revolve. Nothing lost, nothing rushed, just a rehearsal of what the main stem will keep and what it will let go. Then the eddy feeds back, returning what's clarified to the ribbon. Pool and riffle writes a breathing pattern across reach after reach. The pool invites inhale, depth slowing, surface smoothing, the world seen through a thicker lens. The riffle answers exhale, shallows fluting into bright texture, oxygen braided into sound. Inhale in the pool, exhale over the riffle. Your body echoes without being told. The chest widens, then releases. The throat stops supervising. The thought tempo resets by consent, not command. Between breaths is a hush, with room for more water to arrive. Two threads find one bed, and the stereo widens. You hear it even if you call it sight. Left hand murmurs tasting a gravel bar, right hand murmurs glossing bedrock, both arriving at the same gentle downbeat. The merge zone is a language lesson in agreement, angles easing, shear distributed, the seam first visible as a braid of textures, then disappearing into a single timbre that contains both. Nothing argues, everything tunes. Reynolds leans another click at the riffle lips. Tiny whirls wink into and out of being, stitched to stones like tassels. They are not trouble, they are attention's toys, ways the flow shows you it can carry play while holding purpose. The main body stays courteous, momentum kept in lanes by banks and depth, while margins write cursive flourishes that let light practice its scales. You feel trustworthy complexity forming, not noise, but richness. Maybe every meeting is a return. Let the sentence sit where a watch might, steady against your skin. Return is not backtracking. It is recognition that the root has family. Tributaries bring stories the trunk remembers having told long ago, now told again in a new dialect. The listener in you brightens at the idea that addition can make identity clearer instead of crowded. A pebble divides a pair of rivulets and then introduces them again around its downstream hip. The tiny twin threads do not debate which is truer. They trade small gifts, slight temperature differences, hints of tannin, a few bright grains, and become a single line more sure of its own flavor. On the scale of footsteps, this is a flicker. On the scale of meaning, it is instruction. Branching doesn't always mean separation. Sometimes it means becoming more yourself. The valley's cursive gathers a longer phrase. Side gullies contribute commas. Beaver-slowed flats contribute ellipses. Fallen limbs add diacritics that make the current pronounce itself differently for a while. The syntax holds. Pool, riffle, glide, bend and counterbend, narrow throat, sudden room. Everywhere, the breathing pattern persists. Inhale where the depth asks, exhale where the cobbles lift. Your own pace falls in, so naturally you only notice in retrospect that the day has learned how to walk you. What you once called the ribbon holds more voices now without raising its volume. The channel widens a little, deepens a little, settles into the paradox you can feel with your ankles. More energy, less urgency. This is the ease of good company. Capacity distributed, responsibility shared. Nothing special is required of any single part when the group is tuned. The water writes teamwork without the word. When does a ribbon become a river, and how will you know? You let the micro loop open and leave it, the way a musician leans on a suspension to sweeten the release. The answer is near enough to taste and far enough to keep you attentive. Meanwhile, the signs keep arriving. Banks whose names you could start to give, a channel that holds its line against weather without losing warmth, a depth that remembers last winter and plans for the next. Meanders lengthen with confidence. The outer bank leans into sculpting and learns restraint. The inner bank lays down its crescent of satiny sand. Across the cross-section, a slow helix ferries grains, and even a few laid down thoughts from side to side, a ferry that never needs a rope. You can see the past, in scrolls of abandoned bends ghosting the floodplain, and the future in the next hint of asymmetry becoming intent. None of it hurries, all of it accumulates. The confluences keep arriving, each a small proof that agreement scales. Where two brooks meet, you can stand with 1 foot set to each timbre and feel the chord bloom at your shins. The seam at first is visible, temperature, color, a line of bubbles. But downstream, the differences blend to character. Togetherness is not erasure, it's composite truth. The thought comforts more than any single fact could. Pause longer, whisper slower. Let the widened stereo of joining streams settle you the way dusk settles light. No snap, just the feeling that more of you has room now. The body takes the hint with gratitude, adding another beat of rest to each breath, each step. You keep hearing the hook, quiet as moss. Maybe every meeting is a return. Ahead, the channel opens a shade wider, and yet the intimacy does not thin. Scale is not the enemy of closeness when the grammar is shared. The water keeps saying forward in a voice you recognize as partly yours, partly older. Somewhere beyond the next bend, the word that fits will arrive on its own terms, cool, wide, inevitable, but not yet. Let the sentence keep writing. Let the valley finish this loop of cursive before you ask for the name. Widening keeps its courtesy. The banks step back a pace. The voice grows fuller without raising volume. Long grasses bow and stand again. Gravel bars lengthen like commas you can walk upon. Confluences arrive at intervals that feel like sense breaks in a paragraph. Meaning gathers, breath enters, the sentence continues. The valley reads itself aloud in water. Reynolds leans another gentle degree. The pivot you can feel as a soft embroidery along margins. Little rosettes behind cobbles, silk threads of spin winding and unwinding where roots reach in. Whirls are keepsakes, not complications, turnings that remember without detaining, teaching the main stem to keep character while entertaining detail. The ribbon accepts them like stories told on a porch, listened to, smiled at, folded into the evening's larger shape. Pool and riffle set the walk. Inhale in the pool, depth, glass, a held tone that smoothed the mind to see through. Exhale over the riffle, texture, brightness, a fine spun hiss that salts the air with oxygen and ease. Your chest agrees. Cadence resets to the river's lung. Between the two, a glide, the long syllable that makes both breath and thought feel inevitable. You do not have to remember to follow it. You have to remember nothing. Tributaries keep their appointments without clocks. A side thread arrives from aldershade, tea-dark and cool. Another comes chalk-clear over pale cobble. Each brings its dialect. Each leaves with the new chord. Where they meet, the stereo widens. Left hand, right hand, then resolves into a single, richer center. What you hear as width, the river feels as capacity. What you see as merging the river knows as kin returning home. Maybe every meeting is a return. The sentence finds your wrist again and sits there, calm as pulse. Return is not a circle so much as a braid, strands parting to gather lessons, and then rejoining to carry them forward. Downstream of every join, the water seems more legible, not less. The way a choir clarifies a melody you already knew alone. Meanders lengthen into signatures. One new S teaches the next where to grow. Bars lay down like cushions on the inside curves. Cut banks practice restraint on the outside, offering form without scold. Through the cross-section, a slow helix ferries grains and leaves, and a few unneeded thoughts, side to side, season to season. Floodplain scrolls hold the drafts of older sentences. Palimpsests the river will read again when it needs reminder. You watch time write in a hand that does not hurry and never forgets. The body translates geometry to kindness. You turn your head less, look wider more. Your steps find the places the river has already chosen as easy, firm, not rigid, yielding, not weak. The edges of attention stop snagging on every twig and start riding the larger arcs. Bend ahead, riffle glint, shadow of a deeper run, the dimmer line that says a tributary is en route. Knowing grows quiet, quiet grows sure. When does a ribbon become a river, and how will you know? You let the question rest again in its little eddy. Then, as if the channel itself decided the timing, the answer arranges in plainness you can't miss. You know when the seam between joiners vanishes into one timbre that still holds many. You know when pool and riffle repeats like a pulse you can count from memory. You know when banks begin to keep their shapes across storms, and names would fit even if no one spoke them. You know when bridges make sense not as leaps of faith, but as continuations of a line already sure of itself. You know when the water starts carrying a sky large enough to show weather coming, and your breath unconsciously matches what it sees. The word doesn't arrive. The body arrives at the word, and yet you don't say it. Naming is not refusal, but reverence. You wait with it on your tongue the way a note waits in the throat before it joins harmony. Eddies shoulder small archives into shade and offer them back polished. A leaf turns and turns until it is both itself and water. Pebbles draft their little league kingdoms. Sand writes and erases cursive on bars, a handwriting practice that never grades. Everywhere the theme persists, confluence is kinship, not collision. What comes together keeps more of itself because it can rest part of its weight on others. Branching reappears, this time as braid rather than break, channels dividing to pass a bar, then rejoining with a pleased certainty. The lesson repeats in a new key. Branching doesn't always mean separation. Sometimes it means becoming more yourself. You can feel the foreshadowing in your ribs. The future will ask for this understanding again, when the many must part to keep being one. Listen for a longer pause. Let whisper go slower still. Allow the stereo to widen until the merge ahead fills your hearing, like dusk fills distance. Two streams approach, one cool with pine shade, one sun bright and fast. Their shoulders touch, their sentences lean into each other. The seam braids bubbles and lights for a dozen strides. Then the line smooths. What was two has become one, with room enough to carry both stories without apology. Reynolds sets another notch and still refuses drama. Whirls grow larger, tidy, honest to their stones. The surface speaks two languages at once, gloss and grain, and both are readable. Where a fallen trunk asks the current a question, the answer is plural. A thin chute, a soft spillway, a quiet backwater where minnows write silver cursive among stems. The complexity behaves like hospitality. The valley lifts its ceiling, cloud and hawk both fit. The water carries the world without strain. Lichened boulders, a shadow of alder leaves, the striped lattice of sun mended by ripples. The sound broadens into something that could be called choral if it weren't so unassuming. It is not louder, it is more available. Your thoughts, which once had edges and errands, find places to set down and watch. You test the truth with the simplest act. Stand still. Arrival continues without your help. The current does not need your momentum to make its case. If you step in, it will take your shape without losing its own. If you step out, the sentence goes on, generous with or without your feet to underline it. The comfort is not in being necessary. It is in being included. Maybe every meeting is a return. Keep it. The phrase smells of clean stone and warmed grass. It explains 1,000 small reconciliations you didn't know how to honor. It tells you that widening can be intimacy, that addition can be gentleness, that identity is not thinned by company when the grammar holds. Downstream, the confluence you've been hearing before seeing finally rounds the bend, an opening like a thought that has found its next, larger container. You feel the scale change in your sternum first, then in your ears, then underfoot as the bar you're standing on lowers into the new run. The seam draws its last pale line and dissolves into one lucid body whose surface keeps both the gloss of calm and the grain of going. You could name it now, the collective word that fits. But why hurry the kindness? Let the unnamed widen once more. Let the breath in you match the breath in it, longer in the pools, lively over the riffles. Let your listening drift ahead to where the bends become a memory you carry by feel. The river will take its own name when it wants, and when it does, you will recognize it not as a label, but as a temperature, a texture, a promise kept by scale. For now, let the last line be sensation rather than syllable, cool, wide, inevitable. The river grows articulate. Boulders comb vortices into spirals that stitch the current together, seams of turning that hold the straight parts in place. Banks yield and reshape in soft syllables of silt, each small letter carried, laid down, revised. You hear turbulence not as uproar, but as lullaby with a rougher nap, the way a wool blanket warms by texture. Nothing here is violence. Everything is a textured embrace, a hand rubbing circles between your shoulder blades so you can sleep. Boundary layers stroke rock faces, like cats choosing where to lean. Closest to stone, water slows and smooths, a thin hush that honors contour. Just beyond, velocity lifts, catches, curls, the hush turning to thread, the thread to braid. You may never notice it, some but form is a slow conversation with resistance, you whisper, and the current nods without breaking. Erosion isn't an argument. It's a listening that lasts long enough to change both voices. Coherent structures appear like braids in long hair, ropes of motion, holding shape even as the whole head moves. One spiral births its neighbor, alternating curls that unlock pressure behind boulders and lay it gently downstream. Cross-sections sing in layers, near bed glide, mid-column carry, surface gloss lifting light into small currents that write and rewrite the day. A single protruding stone drafts a lee where the flow needs itself soft, then releases in tidy packets of spin that travel like messages and unravel only where they are read. Banks speak in a grammar of give. Cohesive clay lets go in plates, silt in whispered dust, sand in bright syllables that skip, sit, decide. Vegetation, root-knuckled and patient, edits the sentence, holding some lines, letting others rephrase. You can't tell where sculpt becomes softness, because sculpt is softness here. Curve taught by many seasons, saying the same kind thing. This way, but kinder than yesterday. Sediment walks two gates, and both belong. Suspension is the quick-footed traveler riding the middle air of the water, fines lifted as like carried, showing you the river's length without touching every floorboard. Bedload is the heavier step, grains shouldering along the bottom, roll, saltate, rest, like companions who insist on greeting each stone by name. Both are footsteps of the same pilgrim. You can hear them as counterpoint, pebbles knocking gently under clear water, distant aerial arcs of the river's bends, tracing calm vowels across the valley. The sound swells and slows in waves. Over shallows, riffle hiss lacework into the ear. Under deeper runs, the tone turns bell low and holds, a drone that rests the mind by being fully itself. Between the two, standing waves hold shape on the tongue of a boulder, undulant and faithful, as if the river had found a note it refuses to abandon. Your body, overhearing, empties a little more effort it didn't know it was carrying. Closer to rock, the boundary layer thickens and thins, stroking faces with a kindness that still accomplishes change. Micro swirls polish high spots, shadow pockets preserve small cools, and at each tiny corner, the meniscus of the world makes a decision you don't need to manage. Form listens, adjusts, listens, adjusts. The current is writing character into stone the way years write patience into a voice. Nothing flinches, everything learns. Where boulders congregate, the river becomes articulate in plural. Sheer layers peel from flanks and roll into matched scrolls, fabric that keeps itself by moving. Boils rise, soft domes that lift the surface and sigh down again, like thought appearing and settling without drama. Across the bed, Streaks of faster water weave with lanes of calm, a tartan of motion that reads as order when you step back a pace. Complexity is not clutter. It is capacity made visible. You feel the teaching land where you keep your tensions. Shoulders begin to unknit, stitch by stitch. The tongue drops from the roof of the mouth and leaves the palate to be sky. Between the brow and the scalp, small muscles put down their tiny tools. The river keeps its knitting needles busy so you don't have to. You're allowed to be carried by what already knows the route. Now the cadence lifts, riffle to shoot, shoot to curling apron, a brief, bright dash that brings oxygen like news. Bedload ticks a little louder, chinking grace notes that never turn to clatter. Above, the planform shows larger arcs, the valley's handwriting loosening into long S's practiced over centuries. You can see the future here, where the outer bank will lay back, where the inner bar will gleam, where one stubborn willow will persuade a bend to hold. Energy gathers in texture, then shares it. Coherent packets of spin, hair braids of flow, carry momentum across lanes without tearing lanes apart. A submerged log coaxes a slow helix that ferries cool from shaded margin toward the sunlit midstream. The exchange finishes as if it had always been intended. Even as numbers rise, manners remain. Turbulence speaks quietly enough to be trusted. Suspension darkens a little with rain memory. Bedload brightens when the riffle steepens. Vines ride high, gossiping in a cloud that never quite becomes a mood. Cobbles shoulder along, laughing softly at their own roundness. You begin to recognize yourself in both kinds of footstep, light where you can be, grounded where you must. Maybe the hardest edges of you are only waiting to learn a softer curve. Let the tempo crest and then ease. Give it one wide breath. Let the hush arrive like shade. Now sleep. Let the river carry you. Nothing you meant to hold will drift away. What leaves was asking to travel. Feel the back of your mouth turn to doorway. Feel the ribs widen just enough for water to pass through without touching. The lullaby keeps its rough nap, comfort by texture, rest by motion that never quite stops. The shoreline edits itself syllable by syllable, a calf scoop of bank releases with a sound you can almost hear, then melts into a tongue that smooths a shallower phrase downstream. Grain by grain, a sentence is revised without any word being accused. In that kind grammar, fatigue can soften into contour. The river is showing you how. More detail returns, because rest makes room for seeing. On the wake of a boulder, twin vortices trade places down a dusk blue alley, a von Karman street written in lowercase, patient ligatures linking curl to curl. In the seam, where fast meets slow, foam marks a boundary like punctuation. Comma, comma, glide, before the line rejoins its own center. Your breath keeps copying the punctuation, and copying turns to keeping. You may never notice it, but form is still conversing with resistance. Every polish pays for itself in later ease. Each small surrender of sharpness buys a longer calm for the miles ahead. The river's catechism is simple enough to sleep inside. Touch, round, carry, touch, round, carry. You do not have to memorize it. The bed will. Sound slackens again, as if a hand had dialed the day down half a measure. Under the clear pane, pebbles keep tapping like distant knitting needles, steady, companionable. Overhead, the aerial arcs of the valley's bends hold their slow vows. You stand at the meeting of rough and smooth and feel how being held in texture teaches a deeper kind of smooth, one that includes its frictions instead of fleeing them. Let the shoulders lower once more. Let the tongue rest where vowels are born. Let the eyes widen at the edges so the river can pass through without snagging. Turbulence keeps the lullaby true. Erosion keeps the lullaby wise. You are not being diminished. You are being rounded toward the shape that travels well. The current thickens its consonants around another field of stone. then softens them into a longer vowel. You can hear a future lengthening in the tone, but not yet. For now, stay with the stitching. The spirals sewing water to water, the banks answering in silted syllables, the whole reach practicing the slow conversation that makes form and keeps it kind. Under the gloss, 1,000 patient negotiations. Each protrusion teaches separation and return. The flow parts cleanly, hesitates in the lee, then gathers itself into a stronger together. Upstream of a boulder, a looping scarf of spin tucks along the base and holds, a horseshoe curl that strokes stone without tearing at it. Downstream, paired vortices step away in alternating footprints, a soft parade that keeps the channel awake and kind. You can hear their logic in your rib cage. Spread, tuck, release. Spread, tuck, release. The bed answers with grammar you can feel through soles. Armor forms where floods once shouted. Imbricated cobbles tilt and lean like books that learned which way to rest. When water rises, some volumes shift a page. When it falls, the shelf keeps its order. There is a moment, no louder than a lifted eyelid, when holding becomes going. The grain shivers, unhooks, thus hops, a saltation no one scolds, and the river records both the letting go and the landing. Boundary layers keep stroking faces, writing quietly in film-thin lines you'll never see and will always benefit from. Where moss slicks the stone, the hush deepens. Where quartz stands naked, the fingers of flow tap brighter. The conversation's patience is its strength. Abrasion sounds like the faintest glass paper. Dissolution tastes like time. Weathering does the slow work of both, so stone can learn the curve that travels best. Energy braids itself into courtesy. Jets slice from constrictions and fan into sheets that never forget to fold back. Boils lift and sigh flat again, the surface breathing in domes. Shear layers peel and stitch, all of it a textile of motion that keeps its seams by moving. You realize the river is never trying to be smooth by erasing difference. It's making smooth that includes its stitches. Texture as belonging. Suspension writes cloud, T-tint and mica, while bedload keeps the percussion low, a soft tick that never hurries to become clatter. In freshet, the cloud thickens and the ticking quickens. In lean season, clarity returns, and pebbles talk more than they travel. Both are true, both are calendars. Your own days recognize themselves, some for carrying, some for rounding, some for resting still and letting the next shape find you. A reach of shoots arrives, energetic but mannerly. Water folds over a ledge and draws thin, then gathers into rolling aprons that cradle their own foam. The sound lifts into a sibilant weave, and your breath leans forward to meet it. One attentive in-breath, one long, satisfied out. Then a hushed glide extends like a hallway of carpet, and the cadence slows without being asked. The river knows how to hold your nervous system in both hands at once, one hand lively, one hand steady. You may never notice it, but form is a slow conversation with resistance. The line returns, truer for being tried. The current writes letters in stone and edits them with weather. You feel the same editorial work underway behind your breastbone. What once insisted becomes articulate. What once bristled turns to contour. Maybe the hardest edges of you are only waiting to learn a softer curve. Look close where fast meets slow. Foam traces the seam like punctuation, comma, comma, breath, then disappears into the sentence again. Pebbles knock gently under a clear pane, the sound like far knitting. Above, the valley's long arcs hold their aerial vow. You feel yourself positioned exactly between the detail and the overview, the way good counsel positions you between impulse and patience until they can trust each other. Now the river shows its schooling tricks. Along the thalweg, the dark braid of deepest going, coherent packets of spin ferry momentum to places that need it. Margins borrow, midstream lends, and no ledger is kept. The exchange is its own receipt. A fallen trunk grows a velvet wake where minnows sign their silver names. A rocky rib pinches the current, and the answer is plural. A thin tongue, a soft spill, a pocket of stillness where a leaf rehearses turning until turning becomes arriving. Numbers rise without temperament. Reynolds leans to turbulence as if it had always been the plan, and perhaps it was. Whirls larger now, yet tidy, bursts and sweeps that lift grains, then set them down as if tucking in a child. You hear the threshold in your ear, a tug that almost becomes noise. Then the river refuses harshness and rounds its insistence into guidance. Texture, yes. Teeth, no. Let the tempo pick its crest again. Feel the breath brighten to meet it. Then, while the mind is open, allow another wide breath, a hush that lays a cool palm over thought. Now sleep. Let the river carry you. No vigilance needed. The current keeps watch where you cannot. What you meant to keep will still be yours. What wants to travel will take the invitation you were too kind to deny. Back in the body, small permissions multiply. Shoulders slide one more stitch loose. The tongue rests in the cradle of the jaw. Even the skin at the temples feels less busy, as if each pore had set down its tiny clipboard. You are being shown, in water's grammar, how endurance becomes gentleness without losing strength. The lesson lands because it is older than you and speaks softly. The river's voice grows articulate in plural again, then edits itself toward grace. A field of boulders, each with its horseshoe curl, each sending a matched pair of vortices downstream, thickens the consonants into a mesmerizing run. Between them, silk lanes thread forward untroubled. In the seam, bubbles stitch a dotted line you could rest your eyes upon for an hour and not be scolded by time. Complexity is hospitality, every pattern making space for the next. Erosion keeps its million-year patience while remaining practical in the minute. A notch deepens where a trickle returns every afternoon. A clay ledge slumps at rain's persuasion and becomes a bar that will one day host willow. A pebble that left its mountainside 3 floods ago loses a corner it didn't need. You understand. You are not being worn down. You are being shaped for distance. Feel the valley widen by a breath. Overhead, the great arcs draw themselves slower, grander. Underfoot, the pebbles continue their intimate tapping like a metronome too kind to count out loud. Between those scales, the river rounds one last stubborn boulder, and something in the tone lengthens. Standing waves smooth. The hiss cools to gloss. A glide pulls long as silk laid out on a table. Maybe the hardest edges of you are only waiting to learn a softer curve. Keep the thought the way a pocket keeps a river stone, warm from being held, cool from being made. Let it teach you as the current teaches the bank, not by scolding, by repeating. Every pass is kindness with consequence. You can almost feel another influence, leaning from far away. No tug yet, just the idea of a larger metronome. The glide holds its calm a little longer than a reach like this would usually allow, as if an unseen hand had smoothed it from below. The river starts measuring itself in longer syllables, vowels that imagine a horizon wide enough to answer back. Not see, not yet, but the foreshadow of its patience. Sound lowers its eyes. Pebble talk fades to a thoughtful murmur. The aerial arcs dim as evening leans in, or perhaps as distance gathers. The channel is still moving, still rounding, still conversing with every small resistance, but the conversation has learned to pause between clauses without losing its place. You recognize the pause. It's the same one that appears at the end of a day, well-traveled and well-tended. Let the current finish its rounding of the final boulder. Watch the wake settle, the paired vortices unwind into silky lanes, the surface take the shape of a long breath you can ride. The river's articulate textures have delivered you here on purpose, into lengthened calm, into vowels that can hold weather, into a patience generous enough to admit a coming tide when it arrives. Now sleep and let the river carry you. The miles ahead will teach new curvatures. For this reach, learn the grace of after motion with its edges softened, an easing that keeps direction while lowering voice. The lullaby remains textured, the embrace particular, and the promise is the same as ever. Form will keep conversing with resistance until both are kinder than they began. The river remembers the moon the way a sleeping body remembers breath. Bridges arch and hold the memory in steel curves. Towns lean toward their reflections and practice being doubled. Below the gloss, fish silver themselves under broken starlight, small commas flicking through a long sentence. The moon lifts her quiet baton, and the whole reach answers. No applause, only the widening of a pulse that travels from bank to bank. Tides become a low metronome under everything, a slow hand on the lower back of water, reminding it of home. Your room is still, and yet you travel. Curtains barely stir. The clock rehearses its old second hand, but the river moves in you while you listen. Lamplight domesticates the corner of a page, and the same light draws a narrow stripe on the slow back of a barge easing past a wharf. Night markets along the waterfront keep their small suns open, steam rising from pots, sizzle speaking in vowels, paper lanterns measuring the breeze. The river takes it all into its grammar and passes on without hurrying, a song slowed enough to be lived. Reeds tick against a wooden hull like a soft metronome for the marsh. You can hear it from here if you want. Tick, tick, the boat's skin and the river's skin arranging a polite conversation. Farther upstream, a train window carries a traveling mirror. Your own face could be in that pane, briefly rivered, then gone. Somewhere a watchman's light on a barge draws a thin path across the paneled black. The path leans, shortens, disappears as the angle changes. And all the while the moon's tug keeps time none of the people are counting, a larger measure that includes everyone whether they notice or not. The tide's reach feels like a memory across distance. The river, so certain of its downhill life, surrenders an inch, gains it back, surrenders again. Nothing is lost. A brackish syllable threads its way into freshwater. A freshwater syllable returns the favor. At lulls, you could swear the whole body holds its breath. At turns, you feel the valley itself exhale. The montage widens and keeps its kindness. A footbridge holds two people pausing, their winter coats in quiet conversation, while below them the current carries the moon in pieces. A market stall piles citrus like portable suns, and the Rhines release their small sky as knives work, bright, precise, brief. In the slipstream of a ferry, minnows hang like a thought that can't decide and then decide together. A cat walks the parapet of a canal wall and watches its double walk beside it. The moon makes no demands. The moon only returns. Inside you, mitochondria drink like tidy estuaries, pulling energy into calm harbors, sending it back out in vessels invisible to the eye. Outside you, estuaries widen with the night's slow breath, mouths opening to let the ocean taste the river, and the river taste the ocean. A teacup steams by your hand. A galaxy spirals in a photograph on a phone you forgot to dim. Micro and macro trade hat and coat without fuss. The scale changes, but the ritual doesn't. The water inside you is older than the sun's latest breath, not metaphorically, literally. It learned its hydrogen as a first language when space was very young. It learned its oxygen from old stars that exhaled the materials of memory. It traveled in comets and in mantle size, in clouds that mothers of continents wore like shawls. It isn't in a hurry. It does not forget. Awe does the teaching while the cup cools. You are mostly water. Water is mostly memory. Rest. The moon conducts with gravity, yes, but what you feel is permission. A tug so calm it convinces, not commands. Buildings lean into their own reflections and come away less certain which side is truer. The river shrugs and carries both. Footfalls on a midnight bridge set a rhythm the water ignores and incorporates at once. Street lamps write their long braided letters across the surface, and a small wind makes corrections no one will see again. A fisherman's float blinks once like an eyelid at the far bank, then resumes its patience. Your room is still, and yet you travel. A page turns, a pane fogs under your breath. In that oval of blur, the moon doubles and softens. The way you once discovered your face was two faces, then one. That fog clears, as fogs do, and the river keeps its appointment with the ocean's thought. The pulse that begins out beyond the headlands arrives at your sternum with an almost smile. Some distances aren't far, they're just wide. Layer the switches faster, gently, the skin at your wrist gleaming where you rinsed it, an estuary's skin gleaming where a tidal bore smooths the incoming, the tear that didn't fall because it didn't need to, rain stitched silver over a stadium's dark, cilia tasting, plankton pulsing, a moon jelly turning like a second hand that forgot to count, a harbor crane sleeping, a satellite whispering past, a cloud carting the moon into wool, a town's lights make a galaxy in puddles left by an afternoon shower. The galaxy makes a town when you squint at the photograph and imagine warm windows far inside. The river remembers everything and repeats only what serves. On the stone ribs below a bridge, graffiti repeats a heart and a name. The tide points a tongue at the letters, learns them for an hour, and forgets them by morning. Forgetting here is just another kind of carrying. It is late enough that the night markets rake their embers into polite circles. The ferries lower their eyelids and hum to themselves. A barge slides under a lift bridge, and the counterweights breathe out. Somewhere a boy bicycles along the levee and lifts one hand into the moonlight to see if it can hold a piece. It can for a moment. The river holds pieces all the time and calls it reflection. Your room is still, and yet you travel. The pull at the base of your skull eases. The jaw unhooks from its own habits. The breath takes a longer lane without being asked. The river's momentum is not at odds with your quiet. It is the quiet's carrier. You are allowed to be still and moving, to be here, and in a harbor black as polished basalt, where a rope knocks a hole with a metronome's manners. Between now and the mouth, the tides will keep setting and unsetting a table. Between now and your sleep, the moon will keep returning her silver, low voice. When you lean close to the window, your breath may find the glass again and make you a small cloud to draw in with a fingertip. The ritual is simple. The river is always there. The moon always returns. You are always welcomed back to this channel's harbor. Next time, a snowflake's first geometry catching light enough to prove itself. One night soon, a star's forgotten rain returning, as spark you can drink without knowing its name. For now, this wide world montage holding steady, bridges arching, towns reflecting, fish writing broke starlight cursive, and you in a still room that keeps traveling with a river that remembers the moon. Moonlight keeps teaching the surface how to read itself. A silver seam pulls long, breaks, mends. The river wears it like a quiet sash that changes length with every blink. Bridges hold their arches like slow questions and receive the same answer each tide. Yes. The town leans its lights into water and learns generosity. Everything given comes back changed, softened, widened, truer to curve than to edge. Your room is still, and yet you travel. The hum in the walls selects a key. Your breath chooses the same. The window is a low harbor. Your pulse is a mooring line that gives and holds. On the far bank of night, two figures step onto a last ferry and touch foreheads as if to tell each other the river's secret with their bones. The wake unspools and stitches itself again, a seamstress who never grows tired. The moon's tug is an etiquette more than an order. The whole body leans and returns. Up estuary, reeds write metronome on a hull. Down in the channel, a barge light glows like a promise that refuses to hurry. Along the quay, stalls fold into themselves, steam thinning from pots, knives resting their reflections. The river receives every closing and keeps the night open anyway. Switch scales quickly, like a hand flipping postcards, a droplet beating on a vine, an inlet breathing under a fog that lifts and strips, a neuron pulsing, a lighthouse turning, a plankton bloom widening into chalky milk, your eyelids lowering, a satellite sliding across the black with the shyness of a thought you're not ready to share. None of it demands, all of it belongs. The water inside you is older than the sun's latest breath, still true, still literal. Hydrogen born when the universe learned to cool, oxygen forged in stars that died generously, meetings arranged in the dark of space and the bright of mantle size, arrivals on comets, on vapor, on breath. Most of what you call now has visited before in other names. The tea you lift has seen mountains younger than your smallest secret. The river recognizes its elders in you. A train passes a marsh, and the windows river themselves for a heartbeat. In one pane, a sleeping woman tilts toward her reflection, and momentarily they agree, two faces content to share one quiet. The tide, several miles away, lifts the marsh by a thumb width and then sets it down again. That thumb is on your sternum too. It doesn't press, it reminds. Pattern break stays broken long enough to let awe keep its seat. The page holds still. The mind holds still. The river keeps moving loud enough to be a hush, and the moon continues without rehearsal. When you return to sentences, they have fewer unnecessary corners. Your room is still, and yet you travel. Mitochondria tend their light like lamplighters along an old canal. Estuaries widen like palms saying yes. A teacup has its private weather. A galaxy keeps its spiral without needing your news. The kindness of these scales is that they never argue about who is larger. They agree on rhythm and let rhythm do the talking. Everywhere the river touches, a version of you is welcomed. Child who pressed a fog oval to glass and wrote a first letter on it. Adult who learns to breathe so slowly that a cup cools in good company. Future walker who will hear reeds tick a hull and think of ribs. The channel's harbor is a ritual, not a place. Moon returning, tide answering, water remembering, each an untiring host. The currents broaden into ledger lines you could read by fingertip. Out beyond the jetties, the ocean raises and lowers the whole paragraph by a sentence at a time. In coves, the tide makes rooms of the same rock cupboards twice each day, arranging and clearing, till the stones know hospitality by heart. In you, salt rests just enough to admit kinship. In the river, salt enters just enough to teach mixing without conquest. Now the montage leans toward names you don't need to speak. A causeway, a key, a lock opening as if exhaling, an eel slipping past a piling, letter of cursive written in living ink, a baker setting dough to sleep at 3 a.m, flour dust making a small lunar halo over a sink, a tug nosing a ship as if asking politely if it might help. With every scene, the river's body measures time not by clocks, but by cycles that look like manners when you see them from a bridge. You are mostly water. Water is mostly memory. The truth has worn the day smooth. It wears the night smooth now. You do not clutch it. You let it sit beside you like a guest who prefers silence and whose silence you trust. You think for a span of heartbeats about beginnings far older than the oldest story you've heard. Primordial oceans steaming under skies that hadn't learned blue yet. Mantle degassing, a word that sounds like laundry and means the planet taught itself to breathe out. Ices from elsewhere, arriving with pockets full of rain. The river doesn't argue with any of it. It is all included in the pronoun we that water uses without flinching. Switch again, smaller, nearer. The meniscus on a spoon rounding into a lip. The moon rounding into last quarter over a chemical calm harbor. The curl of steam from your cup making a second river that climbs. A night heron stepping on stilts through a calendar of minnows. A child asleep in an apartment above the quay, dreaming of a school of keys that unlock doors underwater. No one explains anything. Nothing needs explaining. Your room is still, and yet you travel. The sentence returns with the ease of tide. What moved under you a minute ago is still moving. What holds you now was once clouds. What will hold you next is already on its way in someone else's pocket of sky. A barge horn sounds once, its note the size of a hill. The river answers with a widening gloss, a long yes you can feel at the base of the tongue. If you lean close, you can catch yourself fogging the glass. A quick, private cloud. In its blur, the moon doubles, and then, as if embarrassed, returns to single. You could draw a circle with your fingertip, a harbor within a harbor, and watch its edge bead and vanish. Practice for later, when the sky carries its own veil, and you will know how to read it. Plant the future like bulbs you'll forget until they bloom. Next time, a snowflake's first geometry, 6 doors opening in a silence clean enough to hear. Later, a star's forgotten rain returned, as sparks small enough to live in a leaf, large enough to teach an ocean how to breathe. The river is patient with chronology. You are permitted to be too. The wide world keeps sending proof of companionship. In a delta city, someone folds a paper boat and lets it go. In a mountain town, someone fills a kettle and listens for the first whisper before boil. In a desert, a radio plays quietly in a truck where sleep has become necessary. The driver dreams himself alongside a different river and wakes rested. In a coastal village, nets hang like punctuation, waiting for the next clause. Everywhere, the moon works her soft arithmetic, and no one needs to check it. You are welcomed back to the channel's harbor whenever you wish, and even when you forget to wish. The password is only a breath taken wide and set gently down. The river is always there. The moon always returns. You, always more water than trouble, more memory than doubt, step into a still room and feel the planet's oldest conversation include you without an effort. Your room is still, and yet you travel. Lay the book down, let the cup cool, turn the lamp halfway toward sleep. The tide in your blood and the tide on the bar, the light in your cells and the light on a ferry's wake, the hush in your window and the hush in a marsh. Each keeps the other's company. If you listen, you will hear the river remember the moon the way a lullaby remembers its first child. Stay as long as you like. The cadence keeps itself. When you're ready, let your breath lengthen once, then once again. Let the night do most of the work. The page will be here when morning returns, with a braid of steam, the channel ready to carry you from micro to macro and back, from cup to galaxy and home again. The river loosens. What held as a single dark thread begins to braid, then fan, lanes parting to pass their own new islands, returning, parting again until forward feels like a hand opening. Salinity enters as a quiet guest, not barging but arriving with the patience of tide, testing densities the way dancers exchange weight, fresh atop, salt below, both finding how to lean without falling. The body of water learns to be more than one thing at once. It turns spacious, layered, so certain. The estuary takes on the hush of a cathedral. Light breaks in green and gold, where the water deepens and thins in alternating sheets. Every suspended grain becomes a tiny window, every riff of current a moving tracery. You can feel the air itself lower its voice. Even turbulence behaves as if it had put on soft-soled shoes. Density differences damp what would be noise into murmur, curls loosening as soon as they start, like hair that refuses to tangle. Stratification settles into layered sighs, freshness gliding outward, brine returning beneath with a generosity that looks like memory. You are not still. Even now, you move through time. The sentence lands low where ribs widen. Your breath answers by opening low and wide too, like water deciding to be a field. No rush, all welcome. The diaphragm becomes shoreline. Each inhale is a flood that arrives with manners. Each exhale is an ebb that leaves the room framed and calm. The braid becomes a delta in practice before it becomes one in map. Fingers of current put down their first rehearsals of ground. Sediment remembers the long conversation with resistance and turns that memory into new syllables of coast. Silt settling as if to say here also can be beginning. Flocculation shows itself as kindness you can almost see. Particles that wandered alone in the clarity of upstream meat ions touch, clasp softly, and become heavy enough to rest. The clasp is not a capture, it is relief. What falls writes a platform the water can walk upon later, or the reeds, or you. The river lifts its earlier coronation and wears it at another scale. You think of the splash crown long ago, the rim rising, the drop becoming many without losing itself, and now the delta mirrors that bright grammar in slow earth. Branches spread like a crown seen from above, an opening that is also a promise, to touch more shore, to make more edges where joining can happen. Pattern remembers itself across distance and time. Small and large practice the same syntax without rehearsal. Sound keeps its edges kind. Shore wash takes a deep breath and lets it go on sand, on reed, on shell. Gulls enter barely audible, their vowels far and thin, as if the sky were humming to itself. The river's voice widens with its body, not louder but more available. Gloss here, grain there, an undertone of returning salt that sweetens the cadence instead of scolding it. Even the wind seems to choose lanes to avoid needless crossing. Fresh and salt keep exchanging weight, dancer to dancer. On the surface, a sheet of river glides out, light-shouldered, carrying leaf and reed flower and the faintest stain of upstream tea. Underneath, the sea's cooler hand slides in, shouldering gently back, smoothing ruffles that would be clamor inland. Where they touch, small billows form and fade, a lace of mixing that asks nothing of you but recognition. Layer over layer, the estuary writes accommodation as art. You are not still. Even now, you move through time. The phrase doesn't hurry. It arrives like tide at slack, held long enough to be believed. Banks give themselves broader shoulders. Marshes set out their green candelabra. Channels separate to hold more future. What used to be one path is now many, none rejecting the others, each practicing how to be river and sea at once. Maybe becoming many is how you learn to be yourself. The thought sits in the chest like a warm stone. You watch the water prove it. A dozen threads slide around a midstream island and meet again with more to say. 100 little creeks take the same gravity and speak its accent into different rooms. A single current discovers it can be field, window, mirror, and road without contradiction. Identity widens rather than thins. The science arrives as feeling and leaves as image. You don't measure the salt wedge. You taste the way the tongue knows cool beneath cool. You don't plot diffusivities. You see the sheet of light settle as turbulence softens, the way a long dress quiets footfall. You don't chart a settling curve. You watch clay clasp clay into down-floating constellations that redraw the bottom as they land. Every concept keeps its chalk dust to itself and shows you its consequence instead. Above, The plan blossoms. From a long high, the delta reads like a charter of generosity, channels fork and fork again, blue-green calligraphy on silt paper new enough to smudge. The branching writes outward until it meets tide-written lines coming in, and the two scripts decide to share the page. Somewhere far below that page, a fingertip finds a fogged window and traces the same branching without thinking, veins of warmth on cool glass, proof that pattern remembers its kin. The estuary cathedral keeps taking light in green and gold, and the floor keeps rising by increments too small for attention, until suddenly a little island is. Reeds lace it to the air, crabs sign their names along its margins, a scatter of shells declares a percussive amen. Endings keep becoming beginnings wearing silt. The river has been practicing this the whole time, carrying pieces forward until forward can turn into here. The dancer example continues its lesson. Fresh water listens for openings and shares its lightness. Salt listens for depth and shares its steadiness. Where they meet, the seam dilates and narrows, the way a throat learns song. On the ebb, the small braids sharpen and glitter. On the flood, they soften and veil, and in both cases the page is written legibly. Nothing insists, everything agrees. Beneath the gleam, layered sighs hold. The upper lens goes, the lower comes. Between them, the interface breathes a barely visible undulation that steadies the larger world. Seals roll once and vanish as if obeying a secret courtesy. A school of fish turns as one, silvering the green. Over and over the system chooses collaboration. The turbulence that would have shouted inland now speaks in undertones and is heard anyway. You are not still. Even now you move through time. The delta does not arrive and stop. It arrives and multiplies arrival. Channels that were draft become sentences. Sentences that were water become rooms. Rooms invite more water to keep speaking. You feel the same widening in your own attention, a sense that your edges are edges of belonging rather than edges of defense. Breath continues low and wide, pleased to have learned a new shape. The crown remembers itself again. The first impact raised a rim that jeweled and vanished. Here the river raises a rim of futures and lets them stand. Each distributary is a tine and a tongue, a promise to speak to a different corner of the same ocean. The gesture is the same generosity inverted. Up there, one becoming many in air. Down here, many becoming ocean in light. The symmetry feels like a private answer to a question you forgot to ask. Hold here, shore wash murmurs. Gulls write faint punctuation in the sky. The floor of the sea to be takes another small breath of silt and keeps it. Fresh and salt keep their clasp, trading weight like dancers settling into trust. The cathedral brightens, then greens, then goldens again. The river keeps loosening with precision, practicing the art of becoming many without losing its vow to be whole. From height, the plan keeps opening like a hand learning trust. Tines lengthen, split, lengthen again. Each distributary a quiet sentence that knows where it is going, because gravity and tide agree on grammar. On some tides, the lower layer slides inland like a cool thought, returning to the back of the mind. On others, the upper lens glides seaward with light in its pocket. Between them, the seam breathes, a soft undulation, damped by difference, that turns what would be clamor into choir. Stratification writes its layered sighs cleanly. The lighter water carries spring's tea and mountain memory. The denser returns with salt you can taste without touching. Turbulence, accustomed to flourish inland, takes on manners. Eddies arrive with felt soles, mix just enough to make neighbors familiar, then step back. Where fresh meets brine along a front, the turbidity line draws and erases itself. Cloudier here, clearer there, a living boundary that edits in real time. Sediment settles toward becoming place. Flocks clasp like hands at the end of a long day. Single grains briefly less alone, newly heavy enough to rest. A faint quilt of silt lays onto earlier quilts. Bar, shoal, fan. What falls is not departure, it is preparation. Reeds accept the invitation and stake green notes in the new phrasing. Eelgrass combs the tide. Fiddler crabs annotate the margins. Endings prove themselves to be beginnings wearing silt. You are not still. Even now you move through time. The sentence finds the lowest room of the breath and widens it. The body answers by opening low and wide, as if the diaphragm had learned the estuary's two-layer courtesy: flood in patience, ebb in kindness. Shoulders unlearn their small armor. The jaw rests its hinges. The tongue loosens from the roof and becomes an estuary of vowels. Nothing forced, all permitted. The crown motif returns and enlarges. Once a drop struck and through a circlet of jets and bells. Now a river lays down a branching crown across light and map. Both gestures mean the same thing said at different scales. One becomes many to keep being true. Maybe becoming many is how you learn to be yourself. The phrase sits in the chest like a tide mark, evidence that something both arrived and returned. Shorewash keeps its catechism: gather, bow, release. Gulls barely sketch their punctuation, far and thin, and the sound carries just enough to prove sky is listening. In the quieter draws, the upper lens slicks to mirror and returns a piece of cloud. In the deeper throats, the lower slide carries cool upstream and smooths the surface like a hand. The estuary is not a border. It is a school of agreements. Where channels part around a mouth bar and meet again, the river experiments with being field. Flow slows, spreads, braids. Sand writes pale ribs that shift under an afternoon of tide and then remember by morning. Marsh breath keeps time along the edges, sweet, saline sweet, teaching lungs a patience that's also change. The cathedral light moves with the hour, green to gilt to a silver that feels like silence, and even the wind seems to vote for soft. Science keeps choosing to be felt. Sheer is the texture under your palm when you trail a hand. Damping is the way the surface calms sooner than your eye expects. Estuarine circulation is a two-lane courtesy that always leaves room to pass. You don't graft the salt wedge. You sense its coolness the way the mouth knows the deeper sip. You don't solve for settling velocity. You watch a gleam of clay meet a pinch of sea and turn into down. Above the plan, a satellite would see calligraphy. At the window, a fingertip finds a fogged pane, and without needing instruction, traces the same branching crown. Veins, roots, rivers, cracks in drying mud, the family resemblance across scales, is a kindness that removes the need to memorize. Pattern remembers you. You remember pattern. You are not still. Even now, you move through time. The delta's lanes divide, and the vow does not. What passes by one creek returns by another. What leaves as water returns as ground. What the tide borrows, it brings back with stories. The rhythm is not event, but practice. Identity here is not an outline. It is a weave. Salinity creeps with the tact of tide. In drought, the cool hand reaches farther, teaching reeds new conjugations of brackish. In freshet, the river's shoulder broadens, the lens rides higher, and the sea steps back without injury. Each condition keeps the other honest. Neither wins, both continue. Even the turbulence that stirs the seam knows when to lower its voice because density differences ask it to. Courtesy does more work than force. The braid relaxes into fan. The fan rehearses coast. Channels kink and bend around infant islands. Shallow sheets go slack and bright under noon. At slack water, the whole page seems to pause and listen to itself. In that pause, the body learns a second stillness, one that is not the absence of motion, but the presence of balance. The breath space gets wider again, like water deciding to be a field and then remembering it already is. Maybe becoming many is how you learn to be yourself. Keep it. The distributaries speak the same river in different accents. The marsh adds harmony. The sea holds the key. Each new branch is both a path and a promise. To meet more shores, to include more rooms, to make a wider welcome. The self that widens doesn't thin, it clarifies. On flood, the green lanes thicken, soften, veil. On ebb, edges sharpen, and the writing grows crisp. Fish turn as a single brightness, and then rethread into shadows. Seals draw one breath, roll once, vanish as if punctuation had learned discretion. What would be noise inland becomes a low choral understructure here. The whole body keeps its time with the moon's patient hand on its back. You are not still. Even now you move through time, and the river keeps proving that motion and rest can be the same sentence spoken with different emphasis. The estuary breathes, the delta writes, the sea listens and answers with room. Hold one more moment at the crown, let the shore wash hush, let the gull vowel thin to tracing, let the layered sigh sit where your ribs are learning to widen by themselves. The fan reaches the open and does not end. It simply hands the sentence to the larger page that was always waiting. If a drop can return to sky, when does rising begin? The answer waits one last breath. Cloud cradle, silver breath, so warmth loosens bonds the way gentleness loosens a fist. Sunlight arrives not as a command, but as invitation, tender, steady, patient on every surface that can shine. At the skin of ocean, at the quiet of a lake, on the roof's shallow gloss, in the tea that still remembers steam, the molecules hear the ask. They slip their small hands from one another's sleeves and rise. No strain, no tearing, only becoming light enough to be carried. Ascent writes itself like vanishing ink. What was sentence becomes atmosphere. What was weight becomes hymn. The page is not lost. It is lifted. Heat does its courteous work. A little more motion, a little less holding, a little yes that turns liquid into sky letter. You can feel it wherever warmth meets patience, on reed tips and river flats, on tide pools and palm lines, on the silver of a cup where the meniscus leans toward air. Up is not escape. It is a new room for the same belonging. The answer that waited one last breath begins here. Rising starts wherever softness wins. At noon on a bay's wide back, at dawn in a field's dew, at midnight on a street puddle practicing moon. It starts on your own skin, the cool gone from a wrist rinsed in the sink, film thinning, edges feathering, small departures none of which feel like leaving. It starts in leaf mouths that open to trade, water lifting through green corridors to become cloud, then shade, then rain again. The cycle doesn't close. It keeps a door held for whoever needs to pass. Sunlight keeps its manners. It does not hurry the unbinding. It gives enough for choosing. Water chooses, like a sleeper rolling toward light. Bonds ease. Cohesion learns a lighter grip, then a lighter still. A single molecule steps, and then another, and then the air has a new syllable inside it. You imagine the soft click of hydrogen's hinge, the nod of oxygen's patience, and the trio walks upward with the calm of a promise kept. You are where this happens, not above it, inside it. Your breath listens and answers with the same shape. Low opening, wide consent. Inhale gathers, exhale releases, the body becoming diurnal in miniature. What leaves your mouth is a silver that isn't seen until it finds a surface to soften. What enters your chest carries a bit of ocean you did not visit today, and a bit of desert you've never seen. Exchange is an old language, fluent without grammar. We return the first picture and see it larger. Cloud cradle, silver breath. The sky holds like an armful of light cloth. You breathe and it mists. The world receives its own blur back as kindness. A child once leaned to a window and made a small weather. Now the weather leans to the day and makes a large child of cloud, round-shouldered, ready to carry. The fog on glass was rehearsal. This is the play done gently, each scene made of departures that still feel like presence. No one rushes. Evaporation is not escape at speed. It is a soft lifting. Puddles lose their edges with dignity. Marshes give their little prayers of vapor. Estuary skin offers sweet and salt to the same sky and is thanked for both. Over long flats, the shimmer is a living script, letter that form and fade too slowly to read, saying nonetheless what needs saying, up and with care. You are not outside this story. You are its ease. The warmth in the room is part of the hand that invites. The warmth in your blood is part of the reason the mirror fogs when you lean near. What you are mostly is already on its way to somewhere it also belongs, and then back, and then forth again. This is not fiction. It's truth. If you listen at the lip of a cup, you can hear ascent as silence growing. If you watch at the edge of a tide pool, you can see it as quiver that calms the moment it's recognized. If you stand on a midday dock and open your palm, you can feel micro-cool vanish under sunlight that hasn't learned how to rush. Becoming vapor is not a performance. It is rest in motion. You remember the crown, the first coronation, splash becoming many, and notice the echo. Above the delta's branching crown, there is a softer one, a halo of lift that tessellates and wanders until it finds company. Scale answers scale. What was an instant at a drop, what was a map at a river mouth, becomes weather walking. Everywhere the shape repeats. One loosens into many and remains itself in pattern. Beneath the rising is patience paying off its promise. How long can a drop wait? As long as patience asks, and not a heartbeat longer, you can hear the answer's breath forming, almost spoken, almost. Where will you land? Anywhere you belong, and you always belong. You can feel the promise in the air's open hand, almost closing, almost. The loop lifts, ready to seal. Beginning touches ending, and discovers it was touching the whole time. Your breath tries the width the estuary taught, low and wide, like water deciding to be a field. Gather in the cool that used to be river. Release a warmth that will one day be rain over towns you have not learned to name. Arrive where the ribs find they have more room than they feared, and keep that room without guarding it. Participation is rest. Sleep is travel. You are already part of something grand. The sky takes these small givings and makes a cradle. Vapor convenes, finds kin, agrees on a softness that can shade. The cloud is not a wall, but a pillow. The world leans into it, and the light diffuses into something the eyes can read for longer. Silver breath becomes weather's handwriting. The page becomes kind. You don't need to lift your eyes to see it. You can feel it with the lids closed, a brightening behind the brow, a spaciousness above the tongue, a sense that what rose from here will return as a letter to the same address, readable by scent on a road after rain, readable by drumming on roofs, readable by the way sleep arrives when percussion turns to hush. Nothing vanishes. The ink changes solvents. At the window, your warmth tests the pane and writes a soft oval of blur. The oval carries a sky inside it, more tender than the one outside. You know what to do. Draw a small line, then another, until the fog traces a branching you have seen from satellites and from riverbanks, from deltas and from leaves. The mirror returns the gesture, and the cloud outside learns it too. Fog on glass, fog in sky. Your breath softens the window. The cloud softens the world. A hold here. The last pages wait with their simple tasks. There will be a quiet ritual, no jolt, only a welcome, an invitation to leave the smallest sign and come again for the next drift. There will be the softest question, the kind that answers by opening. There will be the seeds for following nights, a snowflake's first geometry, a star's forgotten rain. There will be the loop-sealed plain enough to believe, but not yet. Gather, release, arrive. Gather, release, arrive. Rising begins wherever softness wins, a quiet patch of sun on a rail, the sheen on a stone warming through noon, dew feeling the weight of morning lift. Heat loosens the hand water makes with itself, and the fingers open without goodbye. What leaves does not abandon, it continues. What continues becomes weather enough to carry names. Your breath practices the same grammar until it is no longer practice. The low room of the ribs finds width without trying. The jaw puts its tools away. The tongue rests from the roof and makes space for vowels. You notice how the body knows the cycle by heart, even when the mind forgets its terms. Gather, release, arrive. Over and over, as if a tide had been installed in you on the first day and never missed a shift. How long can a drop wait? As long as patience asks, and not a heartbeat longer. Waiting is not idling, it is aligning. When the hour fits, water answers the invitation like someone rising when their name is called. Where will you land? Anywhere you belong, and you always belong. Roof, river, sea, leaf, skin, stone. Belonging is larger than address. This is not fiction, it's truth. A molecule loosens and climbs. A cloud convenes and learns its own kindness. Light filters, and the world chooses to be knowable for a while. You are made mostly of this, and therefore mostly of continuity. Rest is participation. Sleep is travel. Already you are moving inside what moves the world. If this gave you rest, leave a quiet like and subscribe for the next drift. No rush, no flare, just a small lantern on the path so you can find your way back. And if you feel like whispering as you go, where did your favorite rain once travel? Roof, river, or sea? You promised yourself seeds, and they are here, folded as simply as pockets. A snowflake's first geometry, 6 doors opening into a room so clean you can hear its shape. A star's forgotten rain, elements wandering back as light you can drink. Both are on their way, traveling at the speed of patience, ready to arrive when night leans close again. The loop closes by telling the truth you suspected. Beginning equals ending equals beginning. The first breath you watched silver a pane was already sky practice. The cloud you see now is already window, already cup, already river, already roof. Ink vanishes to become air. Air gathers to become tenderness. You can feel on your face. Tenderness falls to become the percussion that teaches sleep. Sleep opens to become the quiet, where rising starts. The line is a circle that forgot how to be a line. Out at the estuary, lids of light blink open and shut across the flats as vapor slips free. In town, a kettle writes a little weather and then forgets it perfectly. Over a field, stalks cool by giving. Above a lake, the page empties its sentence into sky and doesn't mind that reading continues elsewhere. You don't need to see any of it to be included. Your breath places you here without ticket or proof. The long questions have their last, soft answers, and sit down. How long can a drop wait? As long as patience asks, and not a heartbeat longer. Where will you land? Anywhere you belong, and you always belong. If a drop can return to sky, when does rising begin? As soon as warmth and consent meet, as soon as being held becomes being carried, as soon as release feels like arrival. And it starts again in you, with this breath that chooses to be kind to itself. At the glass, your warmth returns to its oldest trick. Fog blooms in a small oval. In the blur, the world learns to be gentle. You draw 2 lines and watch them branch into the memory of rivers, into the crown of a delta, into veins, and roots and lightning and leaves. The fog clears, as fogs do, and the drawing remains where it always lived, in pattern. Outside, the cloud leans on the day with the same authority your fingertip has on glass, enough to soften, enough to hold. You are allowed a ritual. Lay the device down like a shell. Feel the room settle into a harbor. Let your breath arrive wider than it left. If this kept you company, leave a quiet sign so we can find one another next time. The series is a tide. It returns because returning is what it knows. Answers and promises finished, the cadence finds its last shape. Triplets, the way rain learns roofs, the way lungs learn light. Gather, release, arrive. Close your eyes. Let the drop rise. We begin again. The first sound returns, the soft pad you felt at the start, a bed under listening. No image insists, no thought asks to be named, the page stays warm. The silence breathes, light as cotton, easy as shade. In this hush, you can feel the circle speaking your name, the way a shoreline speaks tide, not loudly, but so reliably that loudness would be a mistake. Cloud cradle, silver breath.